You probably think this is a heartwarming story about winning the lottery. It is not. On Thanksgiving, in front of 30 relatives, my parents handed me a crumpled $2 ticket while giving my sister a luxury cruise. They laughed at me. Then, exactly 48 hours later, they filed paperwork to claim the $100 million I actually won. But the real horror wasn't the greed. It was the long con plan I discovered in my grandmother's old leather bag. My name is Avery Alexander. I am 33 years old, and in my professional life, I am invisible in the most useful way possible. I work as a landscape architect and accessibility specialist for Harborline Civic Studio here in Raleigh, North Carolina. My job is to design spaces where people move effortlessly, creating gradients so subtle a wheelchair user does not feel the strain of the ascent, and planting foliage that guides the visually impaired through texture and scent. I control environments. I dictate flow. I make sure that structure dictates behavior. Yet, the moment I stepped onto the driveway of my parents' colonial-style house in the sprawling suburbs of Raleigh, I lost all that agency. I reverted to being the family prop. Thanksgiving at the Alexander household was never just a dinner. It was a performance, a stage play written, directed, and produced by my mother, with a cast of 30 relatives who all knew their lines by heart. The air inside the house always smelled of roasted sage and expensive perfume, a cloying mixture that stuck to the back of your throat. I arrived exactly on time, carrying a kale and pomegranate salad that I knew would be relegated to the far end of the buffet table, untouched. As I walked through the door, the noise wall hit me. 30 people were already deep in their roles. There was Uncle Mike, loud and red-faced, holding court about the housing market. There were the cousins, comparing private school tuitions like they were baseball cards. And there was me, Avery, the designated stagehand. My coat was barely off my shoulders before my mother appeared. She did not hug me. She gestured toward the kitchen. "They need help with the ice bucket," she said. Her voice was light, airy, and completely devoid of warmth. "And try to stay out of the way of the caterers. Avery, we paid a lot for them." I went to the kitchen. I filled the ice bucket. I arranged the napkins. I moved the salad forks to the left because someone had put them on the right. I did the work that kept the machinery of the party oiling along, while my sister, Lydia, sat on the plush velvet sofa in the living room, holding a glass of Chardonnay. Lydia was the star. She always had been. She was 2 years older than me, married to a man named Grant Huxley, and she radiated the kind of golden, effortless success that my parents worshipped. Grant was a wealth management consultant, a title that meant everything and nothing, and he stood behind Lydia with a hand on her shoulder. Looking like he was posing for a campaign poster, we moved to the great room for the gift exchange. This was a tradition my parents insisted on. A prelude to the meal. Usually, it was small token exchanges. But this year, the atmosphere felt heavy with anticipation. My father cleared his throat, tapping a crystal glass with a silver spoon. The room hushed. 30 faces turned toward the fireplace where my parents stood, flanking Lydia and Grant. "We have a special announcement," my father boomed, his chest puffing out. "We are so proud of the year Lydia and Grant have had. They have exemplified what it means to be Alexanders. Hard work, ambition, success." My mother stepped forward, holding a large, glossy envelope. She handed it to Lydia with a tremble of theatrical emotion. Lydia opened it. She gasped. She pulled out a brochure and a set of tickets, a Caribbean cruise. Lydia shrieked, "The platinum package." My mother beamed. 10 days, the owner's suite. "You two deserve a break from all your winning." The room erupted. Applause. Whistles. Grant smiled, that tight, practiced smile of his, nodding as if he had expected nothing less. I stood near the archway leading to the kitchen, clutching a tray of empty hors d'oeuvre plates. I felt a familiar hollowness in my chest, a callus that had formed over decades of being the runner-up. I clapped. I smiled. I played my part. Then, the room went quiet again. My mother turned. Her eyes scanned the crowd and landed on me. The warmth in her face evaporated, replaced by a pitying, tight-lipped smile that she reserved specifically for her younger daughter. "And Avery," she said. Her voice carried clearly across the vaulted ceiling. "We did not forget you." She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a small, thin white envelope. It was not glossy. It was not sealed with a gold sticker. She walked over to me, her heels clicking on the hardwood, and held it out. I put the tray down on a side table and took the envelope. It felt light, insultingly light. I opened the flap. Inside, there was no card, no handwritten note of affection. There was a single scratch-off lottery ticket, the kind you buy at a gas station for $2 when you are buying gum. It was not even flat. It was crinkled at the corner, as if it had been sitting at the bottom of a purse for weeks. I looked up at her. My mother laughed, a tinkling, nervous sound that invited everyone else to join in. "We thought that suited your situation better," she said. "You know, since you are always scraping by with that garden work, maybe you will get lucky." The room hesitated for a split second, and then the laughter came. It started with Grant, a deep, barking chuckle, and spread like a contagion. They were laughing at the absurdity of the contrast. The $4,000 cruise versus the $2 piece of paper, the golden child versus the gardener. I stood there, the ticket burning my fingertips. The humiliation was not hot. It was cold. It was a block of ice sliding down my spine. I looked at the ticket, Lucky Sevens jackpot. The colors were garish neon green and orange. Grant Huxley spoke up from across the room. His voice was smooth, projecting easily over the dying laughter. "Hey, do not knock it. Avery," he raised his wine glass in a mock toast. "Luck is the only strategy left for people who lack the competence to build real wealth." The silence that followed was different. It was sharp. Grant had crossed the line from teasing to cruelty, but nobody stopped him. My father took a sip of his drink. My mother adjusted her pearl necklace. Lydia looked down at her cruise tickets, tracing the gold lettering with her thumb, pretending she had not heard. I looked at Grant. I looked at my parents. I felt a strange clarity wash over me. For years, I had tried to prove my worth to these people. I had graduated with honors. I had built a career designing civic projects that actually helped people. I paid my own bills. I did not ask them for a dime. And yet, to them, I was just a failed investment. I forced the corners of my mouth up. It was not a smile. It was a baring of teeth disguised as politeness. "Thank you," I said. My voice was steady, low, and devoid of the tremor they were hoping for. "I am sure this is exactly what I deserve." My mother blinked, unsure how to take that. She had expected gratitude or embarrassment. She did not know what to do with acceptance. Suddenly, a chair scraped loudly against the floor, in the corner of the room, sitting in a high-backed armchair that swallowed her small frame, was my grandmother, Evelyn Price. She was 90 years old. Her hair was a cloud of white, but her eyes were still the same piercing gray they had been when she ran her own logistics company in the 60s. She was the only person in this room who saw me. Evelyn gripped the arms of her chair and pushed herself up. Her hands shook, but her legs locked into place. "That is enough," Evelyn said. Her voice was thin, rasping, but it cut through the room like a serrated knife. "You give one daughter the world and the other a piece of trash? Is this what we have become?" My mother moved instantly. It was a practiced maneuver. She swooped in on Evelyn before the matriarch could gain momentum. "Oh, Mother," my mother cooed, grabbing Evelyn's arm with a grip that looked supportive but was clearly restraining. "You are tired. It has been a long day. You are confused. I am not confused. Martha," Evelyn snapped, trying to pull her arm away. "I see exactly what you are doing." "I see. Let's get you to the guest room for a nap," my father interrupted, stepping in to flank Evelyn on the other side. They were sandwiched around her, a wall of condescension blocking her from the rest of the family. They began to walk her out of the room. Evelyn struggled for a step, then stopped. She realized she could not physically fight them. She was 90, and they were strong. She turned her head, straining against my mother's grip to lock eyes with me. The room was dead silent. Everyone was watching the elderly woman being escorted out like a misbehaving child. Evelyn did not speak. She stared right at me. She gave a single, sharp nod. Then, her eyes darted to the side, toward the wing-back chair she had just vacated. I followed her gaze. Sitting on the chair was her handbag. It was an old, beaten leather satchel that she had carried for 40 years. It was cracked at the seams and smelled of peppermint and old paper. It looked ridiculous amidst the designer clutches and silk scarves scattered around the room. Her eyes went back to me. The message was loud, frantic, and unmistakably clear. "Do not leave without it. Come on." "Mother," my mother hissed, and they dragged her through the double doors, closing them with a definitive click. The party resumed almost instantly. The tension broke. Someone turned the music up. Grant started telling a story about his golf handicap. Lydia went back to showing off the cruise brochure. I was forgotten. I stood frozen near the kitchen archway. The $2 ticket was still in my hand. I slipped it into the pocket of my blazer. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from the insult anymore, but from the look in my grandmother's eyes. Evelyn was sharp. She did not make scenes. She did not get confused. If she was causing a scene, it was because she needed a diversion. I waited. I busied myself with clearing plates. I moved around the periphery of the room, inching closer to the wingback chair. The bag sat there, a brown lump of history in a room full of shiny, new lies. 10 minutes later, I saw my chance. Grant was demonstrating his swing to Uncle Mike. My mother was still out of the room, presumably sedating Evelyn or arguing with the nurse. I walked past the chair, hooked the strap of the leather bag with my finger, and slid it down to my side. Shielding it with my body, I did not say goodbye. I did not wait for the turkey. I did not ask if they needed help with the dishes. I walked straight to the front door. The air in the house felt thin, suffocating. I needed to breathe. I stepped out into the November night. The wind was biting, tearing through my thin coat, but it felt clean. I walked to my car. A 5-year-old sedan parked at the very end of the long driveway. Behind the glossy SUVs and luxury sedans of the relatives, I threw the leather bag onto the passenger seat. It landed with a heavy thud, heavier than a handbag should sound. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. I pulled the lottery ticket out of my pocket. In the dim light of the overhead lamp, the neon colors looked toxic. "This suits your situation better." I looked at the house. The windows were glowing with warm, golden light. Inside, they were eating, drinking, and laughing. Secure in their hierarchy, they thought they had put me in my place. They thought they had silenced Evelyn, but as I put the car in gear and rolled down the driveway, leaving the gravel crunching under my tires, I felt a strange sensation crawling up the back of my neck. It was a primal instinct, the kind that kept our ancestors alive in the tall grass. Tonight was not just about favoritism. It was not just about being the scapegoat. The way my mother had intercepted Evelyn, the way Grant had looked at me with that sneering confidence, the way the bag felt heavy on the seat beside me, it all felt coordinated. They had handed me a $2 ticket to distract me, to define my value as negligible, but as I drove into the dark, winding roads of North Carolina, clutching the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, I realized something. I was not just leaving a dinner party. I was leaving a crime scene. I just did not know what the crime was yet. To understand why I finally drove away that night, you have to understand the architecture of the evening. The lottery ticket was the explosion, but the fuse had been lit hours before. The moment I walked through the mahogany double doors, I arrived at exactly 4 in the afternoon. Punctuality is a habit I developed as a defense mechanism. If you are late, you give them ammunition. If you are early, you are in the way. Being on time is the only neutral ground. I was carrying a large ceramic bowl filled with a winter salad I had spent the morning preparing. It was a complex recipe involving massaged kale, roasted butternut squash, pomegranate seeds, and a maple tahini dressing. In my world, in the design studio where I worked, detail mattered. Effort mattered. My mother, Martha, was standing in the foyer directing the catering staff. She looked immaculate in a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my car. When I stepped in, she did not stop talking to the server holding a tray of champagne flutes. She simply flicked her eyes toward me, scanned my outfit, a sensible navy blazer and slacks, and then looked at the bowl in my hands. "There is the salad," she said, her voice flat. "Just put it on the sidebar in the kitchen. Avery, we have so much food from the caterers, I am not sure where we will fit it." I walked past her, the ceramic heavy in my arms. "How are you?" "Mom?" I asked, trying to bridge the gap. She sighed, finally turning to look at me fully. She reached out and picked a piece of lint off my shoulder, a gesture that felt less like grooming and more like correction. "I am exhausted. Planning these things is a full-time job, but I suppose you would not know much about that kind of pressure. How is your little job going? Still playing with plants?" The phrase hit me in the center of my chest. "Playing with plants? I am a licensed landscape architect." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice level, "I am currently leading a project to redesign the accessibility ramps for the downtown library to ensure compliance with federal disability acts while maintaining green space." She waved her hand airily, dismissing the explanation as if I were a child describing a finger painting. "Right, plants. Well, just try to keep the dirt out of the house tonight." She turned back to the server, and I was dismissed. That was the opening salvo. It set the tone for the entire night. In the Alexander ecosystem, value was measured in dollar signs and job titles that sounded impressive at a country club mixer. My work, which was about empathy and inclusion, was invisible to them because it did not yield a high-yield return on investment they could brag about. I moved into the living room, which was already filling up with the extended family. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the low hum of competitive conversation. In the center of the room, sitting on the largest leather sofa, was Grant Huxley. Grant was my brother-in-law, but in this house, he was the sun around which all the other planets orbited. He was holding court, a Scotch glass resting on his knee, talking about a merger acquisition he had supposedly orchestrated. My father was leaning in, nodding vigorously. Uncle Mike was listening with his mouth slightly open. Even the cousins, usually bored, were looking at Grant with something approaching reverence. "He is a shark," my father said, slapping Grant on the back. "A total shark. That is what you need in this economy." I stood on the periphery, near the bookshelf. Nobody looked up. Nobody said hello. I was not part of the audience. I was part of the furniture. After a few minutes, my mother bustled in. "Avery," she called out, not looking at me, but at the empty coasters on the coffee table. "Since you are standing there, be a dear and get Grant a refill, and check if the caterers need help laying out the napkins in the dining room." I felt a flash of heat in my face. I was 33 years old. I had a master's degree. Yet, the moment I entered this house, I was demoted to the help. I walked over to Grant. He held up his glass without breaking eye contact with my father. He did not say thank you. He did not even pause his story about maximizing quarterly returns. I took the glass, filled it at the bar, and set it back down. He picked it up as if it had magically refilled itself. As I turned to leave the circle, I caught the eye of Aunt Celeste. Celeste was my mother's younger sister, the only person in the family who didn't seem to run on jet fuel and ambition. She was sitting in a corner chair, nursing a glass of white wine. When our eyes met, I saw it, the flash of pity. She knew. She saw how they spoke to me. She saw the servitude they expected. But she looked away. She took a sip of her wine and turned her attention to the window. That was the family motto. Unspoken but strictly adhered to. Do not rock the boat. Celeste was kind, but she was a coward. In this family, silence was the price of admission. If you spoke up for the scapegoat, you might become the scapegoat. So she watched me get treated like a maid, and she drank her wine. Then, the front door opened again, and the energy in the room shifted instantly. Lydia had arrived. My sister swept in like royalty visiting her subjects. She was wearing a sequined cocktail dress that caught the light, and her hair was done in perfect, glossy waves. Grant immediately stood up, abandoning his story to go to her side. My parents rushed forward. "Lydia, darling!" my mother cried, her voice ascending an octave. "You look stunning." My father hugged her, holding her for a long time, patting her back. "Look at you. The power couple is finally here." I was standing 5 feet away, holding a bouquet of autumn flowers I had brought for the centerpiece. I had been looking for a vase. Now, I just stood there, clutching the stems. I looked like an extra in a movie scene, holding a prop that no one needed. Lydia looked over my father's shoulder and saw me. "Oh, hey Avery," she said. Her tone was breezy, light. "Did you bring those for me?" "No," I said. "For the table." "Right. Well, put them somewhere. Grant, honey, show Dad the photos from the gala last week." She breezed past me. The difference in our receptions was so stark, it was almost comical. Lydia was the main character. I was the background noise. I went to the dining room to arrange the flowers, my hands shaking slightly. It was not jealousy. I did not want Lydia's life. I did not want Grant. What made my stomach turn was the erasure. It was the feeling of screaming at the top of your lungs and having no sound come out while I was arranging the napkins, because my mother had asked, and because I still had that pathetic hope that if I was helpful enough, they would love me. I overheard the conversation drifting in from the living room. They were talking about dates, flight times, passports. "We need to make sure the connection in Miami is long enough," Grant was saying. "I do not want us rushing through the terminal," my mother's voice chimed in. "And we need to book the excursions early. The private beach cabana is a must." I froze. I placed a silver fork down on the tablecloth. I walked to the doorway of the dining room. They were all gathered around a tablet Grant was holding. My parents, Lydia, Grant, even Uncle Mike was leaning in. "Are you guys going on a trip?" I asked. The conversation stopped. It did not stop naturally. It stopped like a car slamming into a wall. They all looked up. There was a beat of silence, a moment of awkward shuffling. My mother was the first to recover. She smoothed her skirt. "Oh, we were just discussing the holidays. Avery, the family cruise, the family cruise." The words hung in the air. I looked at them. I looked at Lydia, who was suddenly very interested in her manicure. I looked at my father, who coughed and took a sip of his drink. "The family cruise," I repeated. "Which family?" Grant laughed. A short, dry sound. "Don't be dramatic." "Avery, we are all going," my mother said, her voice taking on that defensive edge she used when she knew she was wrong but refused to admit it. "Your father and I, Lydia and Grant, Uncle Mike, we thought it would be a nice way to bond." "And I wasn't invited?" I asked. The question came out quieter than I intended. My mother sighed, as if I were being incredibly unreasonable. "Avery, be realistic. We know how busy you are with your work. And honestly, we did not think it was your scene. It is a luxury cruise, formal dinners, high-end entertainment. You are so independent. You have your own life in the city. We didn't want to burden you with the obligation." Independent. There it was. The word they used to bandage the wound they had inflicted. They called me independent to justify their neglect. If I was independent, they didn't have to help me. If I was independent, they didn't have to include me. Independence wasn't a compliment. It was an exile. "So I am too independent to go on a family vacation," I said, feeling the cold logic of their cruelty settle over me. "But not too independent to come here and set the table?" Lydia rolled her eyes. "God. Avery, stop making everything about you. It is just a trip. You probably couldn't get the time off anyway." It was not about the time off. It was about the fact that they had a group chat I wasn't in. They had a plan I wasn't part of. They had a definition of family that stopped exactly where I stood. Then, Grant said something that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Besides, someone has to be around to manage the situation here." He gestured vaguely toward the ceiling, toward the second floor where my grandmother's room was. Although she was currently downstairs being ignored in her armchair, my mother nodded, latching onto this new excuse. Exactly. We need you to check in on the house, and you will need to coordinate with Evelyn's nurses. We can't have her fretting while we are gone. You know how she gets. I stared at them. So, I said slowly, you are leaving for 10 days. And I am not invited because I am the designated house sitter? And because I need to manage Grandma? Someone has to be the responsible one. My father grunted. You are good at the details. Avery, that is your thing. They weren't just excluding me. They were using me. They viewed my grandmother, their own mother and mother-in-law, as a logistical hurdle, a piece of baggage that needed to be stored while they went to drink mojitos in the Caribbean. And I was the storage facility. I looked over at Evelyn, who was sitting in the corner of the room. She was watching us. She couldn't hear every word, but she knew the tone. She knew the body language. She looked small in that chair, fragile. A sudden, chilling realization washed over me. This wasn't just about them liking Lydia more. That was the childhood narrative, the simple explanation I had told myself for years to make sense of the pain. They just prefer her personality. No, this was systemic. They kept me on the outside, hungry for scraps of affection, so that I would be grateful for the crumbs of responsibility they threw my way. They needed me to be the independent one, the responsible one, the one who stayed behind and watched the house and signed the forms and dealt with the messy, unglamorous reality of aging relatives, so they could pretend their lives were nothing but shine and success. They didn't hate me. They were managing me. I looked at Grant's smug face. I looked at my mother's dismissive posture. I felt something click inside my brain. It was the sound of a lock turning. Okay, I said. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, okay. My mother looked relieved. Good. I am glad you are being sensible. Now, can you go check on the ice? I turned and walked toward the kitchen, but I wasn't going to get ice. I was walking away from the delusion that I could ever earn a seat at this table. As I passed Evelyn's chair, she reached out and brushed her fingers against my wrist. Her skin was dry, like paper. Be careful, she whispered. The nurses watch the nurses. I nodded. Though I didn't fully understand yet, I thought she meant the medical care. I didn't realize she was talking about witnesses. I went into the kitchen, leaned against the granite counter, and stared at the untouched salad I had brought. The kale had wilted slightly. The pomegranate seeds looked like little drops of blood. The evening wasn't even halfway over, and I already knew that the script had changed. I just didn't know that the finale would involve a lottery ticket and a getaway car. But standing there, listening to the laughter erupt from the other room, laughter that I wasn't part of, I realized that being the outcast gave me one advantage. When you are standing on the outside, you have a much better view of the cracks in the foundation. And looking back at the living room, at the frantic, performative happiness of my family, I started to suspect that the foundation was rotting. I just needed to find the shovel. The dinner ended the way it always did, with a gradual migration of the satisfied guests toward the plush seating of the living room, leaving the carnage of consumption behind them. My family and their guests had moved on to the digestives and the self-congratulatory stories, their laughter drifting down the hallway like the soundtrack to a movie I was not watching. I stayed behind. This was my role. The stagehand does not take a bow. The stagehand strikes the set. I moved through the dining room, stacking porcelain plates that were slick with gravy and cranberry sauce. The noise from the living room was loud, a cacophony of voices competing to be heard. But back here, in the service areas, it was quiet. The only sounds were the scrape of silverware against china and the rush of water in the sink. I worked methodically. I scraped, I rinsed, I loaded the dishwasher. It was a rhythm I knew better than the rhythm of my own breath. My mother breezed in once, holding an empty wine bottle. There is another case in the pantry. Avery, she said, not looking at me. And make sure you check the study. Your father and Grant were in there earlier, and they probably left glasses on the mahogany. You know how the condensation ruins the finish. She turned and left before I could answer. I finished the dishes, dried my hands on a linen towel, and headed toward the study. The study was my father's sanctuary, a room of dark wood, leather-bound books that were never read, and the heavy scent of pipe tobacco. It was the room where the serious business of the Alexander family was conducted, which meant I was rarely invited inside unless I was being reprimanded or given a chore. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The room was dim, lit only by the green glass banker's lamp on the desk. My mother was right. There were 3 crystal tumblers sitting directly on the wood. Leaving wet rings, I sighed, picking them up. As I reached for the 3rd glass, my eyes caught the state of the desk. Usually, my father was fastidious. He believed that a clean desk signaled a clean mind. But tonight, the surface was a chaotic spread of papers. It looked like a bomb had gone off inside a filing cabinet. Manila folders were splayed open, invoices were crumpled, and envelopes were torn. I should have walked away. I should have wiped the wood, taken the glasses, and closed the door. That was what the obedient, independent, invisible daughter would do. But the conversation from earlier, the cruise, the exclusion, the way they spoke of Evelyn as a logistical burden, was still ringing in my ears. The silence in the room felt heavy, charged with something that tasted like panic. I looked closer at the pile nearest to me. The top letter was not a business contract. It was a notice. The font was bold, aggressive red. Final notice. It said, past due. I frowned. My father prided himself on his financial solvency. He was the man who lectured me on compound interest when I was 12. He was the man who claimed credit scores were a measure of moral character. I put the glasses down on a coaster. I reached out and moved the red notice aside. Underneath it was another letter, a collection agency warning regarding a credit line I didn't recognize, and under that, a bank statement showing a balance that was dangerously close to zero. My heart began to hammer a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. This was not just disorganization, this was a hemorrhage. Then I saw the document in the center of the blotter. It was a thick, staple-bound packet, the paper heavy and expensive. It looked official. It looked legal. The title at the top read, Secured Promissory Note and Loan Agreement. I scanned the figures. My breath hitched. The principal amount was $210,000. $210,000. I looked at the date. It had been signed 3 months ago. I looked at the interest rate. It was 18%. 18%. That was not a family loan. That was Sharkwater. That was the kind of rate you gave to someone you expected to fail so you could take their collateral. I looked at the lender's name at the top of the page. I expected to see a bank, a credit union, maybe a venture capital firm. Instead, printed in crisp, serif font, was a name that made the room spin. Huxley Capital Services. Huxley. I blinked. Sure, I was misreading it. I looked at the signature line for the lender. There it was, in the same arrogant, sweeping script I had seen on birthday cards and Christmas tags for the last 5 years. Grant Huxley. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. Grant, my brother-in-law, the man who was currently in the other room drinking my father's scotch and bragging about his golf swing. He wasn't just consulting for the family, he was owning the family. He had loaned my father over $200,000 at a predatory rate through a shell company that sounded vaguely corporate but was just him. Why? Why would my father agree to this? I flipped the page, my fingers trembling. I needed to see the security agreement. You do not lend that kind of money without collateral. What did my father put up? The house? The cars? I turned to the section labeled Collateral Description. It wasn't my parents' house. The legal description was for a property at 404 Elm Street. I stopped breathing. 404 Elm Street. That was not my parents' address. That was the address of the Victorian house in the historic district where my grandmother, Evelyn Price, had lived for 50 years. It was the only thing she owned outright. It was her sanctuary, her memory box, the place where she had raised my mother. My father had pledged Evelyn's house as collateral for a high-interest loan from his own son-in-law. But how? He couldn't pledge a house he didn't own. Evelyn was still alive. She was sitting in the living room right now. I frantically flipped to the signature page of the collateral agreement. There had to be a mistake. There was a signature, Evelyn Price, but it was wrong. I stared at the ink, and a cold wave of nausea washed over me. Evelyn had been a draftswoman in her youth. Her signature was famous in our family for its precision, sharp angles, perfect loops, a baseline that never wavered. The signature on this page was a spider scrawl. It wavered. It dipped below the line. The loop of the P was broken. It looked like the writing of someone who was weak, someone who was not in control of the pen. I looked at the date next to the signature. September 14th. September 14th. The date triggered a memory, sharp and vivid. I remembered September 14th perfectly. It was a Tuesday. I had left work early that day because I got a call from the family helper. Evelyn had fallen in the bathroom. They had rushed her to the emergency room. She had been on heavy pain medication, confused, drifting in and out of consciousness for 48 hours. September 14th was the day she was in the hospital. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the paper. They had gone to the hospital. My parents, or maybe Grant, had gone to her hospital room while she was drugged, while she was vulnerable and scared, and they had made her sign a document that put her home at risk. They had waited until she was weak to steal the roof over her head. A sudden burst of laughter erupted from the living room, loud and raucous. It sounded demonic now. I pictured Grant's face, that smooth, confident smile. It wasn't the smile of a successful businessman. It was the smile of a predator who had found a herd of wounded animals. He knew my father was desperate. He knew my parents were living beyond their means to keep up appearances. And instead of helping them, he had trapped them. He had engineered a loan they could never pay back, secured by the one asset that actually had value, Evelyn's house. When my father inevitably defaulted, Grant would foreclose. He would take the house. He would kick Evelyn out. And my parents? They were so desperate to maintain the illusion of wealth, or perhaps so terrified of Grant exposing their financial ruin, that they had agreed to sacrifice her. This wasn't favoritism. This wasn't just my mother liking Lydia's husband more than me. This was cannibalism. They were eating their own. I needed proof. I couldn't just walk out and say I saw it. They would deny it. They would burn the papers. They would call me crazy, the jealous sister making up stories. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were slick with sweat. I tapped the camera icon. I made sure the flash was off. I started photographing. I took a picture of the loan amount. Click. I took a picture of the interest rate. Click. I took a picture of the lender name, Huxley Capital Services. Click. I took a picture of the collateral description, 404 Elm Street. Click. I took a picture of the signature page, the shaky, terrified scrawl of my grandmother. Click. I turned the page. There was more. A power of attorney document, also dated September 14th. It gave my father full control over Evelyn's financial decisions in the event of incapacity. They had declared her incapacitated enough to need a power of attorney, yet capable enough to sign a mortgage deed on the same day. I photographed that too. Click. Every image felt like I was loading a weapon. My fear was dissolving, replaced by a cold, hard rage. I had spent my whole life trying to be good enough for these people. I had spent my whole life wondering why I was the outsider. Now I knew. I was the outsider because I had a conscience. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I froze. I quickly shoved the papers back into the chaotic pile. Trying to make them look as undisturbed as possible, I grabbed the 3 crystal glasses. The door pushed open further. It was Lydia. She stood in the doorway, holding her phone, looking annoyed. "There you are," she said. "Mom is asking why the coffee isn't out yet." She looked at me, then at the desk, then back at me. "What are you doing in here?" she asked. Her tone was suspicious, sharp. I lifted the glasses. "Dad left these," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Too calm, too flat. I was just getting them before they ruined the wood. Lydia rolled her eyes. "God, you are obsessed with cleaning. Just come on. We are about to cut the pie." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the hardwood. I stood there for a second, the phone in my pocket burning against my hip. I looked at the desk one last time. The papers lay there, innocent and white, hiding the ruin of a life. I walked out of the study. I carried the glasses to the kitchen. I placed them in the sink. As I walked back toward the living room, I saw Evelyn again. She was still in the armchair, isolated, a small figure in a room of giants. She looked up as I entered. Her eyes locked onto mine. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just looked at me with an intensity that pierced through the noise of the party. Her gaze flickered briefly to the hallway, toward the front door, and then back to me. She knew. She knew what they had done. She knew about the papers in the study. She knew about the signature, but she was trapped in a body that couldn't fight them, surrounded by a family that viewed her as an asset to be liquidated. And then I remembered the bag, the old leather bag I had thrown onto the passenger seat of my car. Do not leave without it. A chill ran down my spine. The bag wasn't just sentimental. The bag wasn't just cookies or old photos. If the papers in the study were the crime, the bag contained the evidence that Evelyn had managed to smuggle out. She had been waiting. She had been waiting for the one person who was invisible enough to slip through their defenses. I looked at my mother, who was laughing at something Grant said. I looked at my father, who was pouring another drink with a shaking hand. I looked at Lydia, glowing in her ignorance or perhaps her complicity. They thought they had broken me tonight. They thought the $2 lottery ticket was the final nail in the coffin of my self-esteem. They thought I would go home, cry, and come back tomorrow to water their plants and sign their forms. They were wrong. I wasn't going to keep the peace anymore. I wasn't going to be the glue that held their lie together. I walked over to my mother. I am leaving. I said. She didn't look up from her pie. Already? But we haven't cut the pumpkin pie yet. I have a headache. I lied. It wasn't a lie. My head was pounding with the pressure of the truth I was carrying. Fine, she said, dismissing me with a wave of her fork. Don't forget to lock the back door on your way out. I didn't say goodbye to Grant. I didn't say goodbye to Lydia. I walked over to Evelyn. I leaned down and kissed her on the cheek. Her skin smelled of lavender and old paper. I whispered in her ear, so low that no one else could hear. I have the bag. I felt her body relax. A long, shuddering sigh escaped her lips. She didn't say anything, but she squeezed my hand, a squeeze that said, "Run." I walked out of the house. I walked out of the warmth and the light and the lies. I got into my car. I looked at the bag on the seat next to me. I started the engine. As I pulled away, leaving the house in the rearview mirror, I knew I was crossing a line of no return. The Avery who had arrived with a salad and a desperate need for approval was dead. The Avery who was driving away had a phone full of evidence, a bag full of secrets, and a $2 lottery ticket that she hadn't even scratched yet. I didn't know about the money then. I didn't know about the $100 million. All I knew was that I was going to burn their house of cards to the ground, and I was going to use their own matches to do it. The week following Thanksgiving was a blur of gray static. I went to work. I sat in meetings about drainage systems and wheelchair ramp gradients. I nodded at colleagues. I ate lunch at my desk. But my mind was entirely elsewhere, stuck in a loop of grainy photographs stored in a hidden folder on my phone. The loan documents, the shaky signature, the undeniable proof that my parents and Grant Huxley were cannibalizing my grandmother's life to feed their own illusions of grandeur. I had not spoken to them. I had not answered the 2 missed calls from my mother, both of which I assumed were requests to coordinate the nurse's schedule for the days they would be on the cruise. I was ghosting my own family, and for the first time in 33 years, I did not feel guilty. I felt hunted. Then came the text from Aunt Celeste. It arrived on a Tuesday evening, just as the rain was beginning to lash against the windows of my apartment. Celeste was the family's nervous system. She felt everything but did nothing. Her message was brief, typed with the erratic spacing of someone whose hands were shaking. Meet me at the Roasted Bean on 4th tomorrow, 10 a.m. Do not call me. Do not talk about this over the phone. Please, that single message. Do not talk over the phone. Confirmed everything. Paranoia is only a pathology if you are wrong. If you are right, it is just survival. It told me that the rot in the Alexander house went deeper than just a fraudulent loan. It told me that silence was being enforced. I threw my phone onto the sofa, the screen glowing in the dim light of my living room. My apartment was small, a sharp contrast to the sprawling colonial estate I had grown up in. But it was mine. It smelled of rain and basil from the herb garden on the windowsill, not expensive perfume and lies. I paced the room, my heart rate spiking. I needed to calm down. I needed a distraction. My eyes landed on the coffee table. There, sitting on a stack of architectural magazines, was the white envelope, the Thanksgiving gift. It had been sitting there for 7 days, untouched, like a piece of radioactive waste. The edges were still crumpled from where my mother had jammed it into my hand. "This suits your situation better." I looked at it with a surge of irritation. It was a joke to them, a prop used to illustrate my poverty in comparison to Lydia's abundance. $2, a throwaway gesture. I walked over and picked it up. I wanted to throw it in the trash. I wanted to shred it. But the orderly part of my brain, the part that double-checked measurements and read fine print, would not let me discard it without resolving it. It was a loose end. I ripped the envelope open. The ticket slid out. Lucky Sevens jackpot. The design was tacky, shouting promises of instant wealth in neon green font. I did not have a coin to scratch it. I did not want to make a mess of silver dust on my table. I grabbed my phone and opened the state lottery app. There was a feature where you could scan the barcode at the bottom to check the status. It was cleaner, faster. I flipped the ticket over. I tapped the scan ticket button on the screen. The camera aperture opened. I held the phone steady, aligning the barcode within the white square. I just wanted it to say, "Sorry, not a winner," so I could throw it away and go back to worrying about the felonies my brother-in-law was committing. The phone buzzed, a tactile vibration against my palm. The screen shifted. Confetti graphics exploded across the digital display. It was a cheap animation, something a junior developer had coded in an afternoon. Then, the numbers appeared. I stared at them. I blinked, waiting for the glitch to correct itself. Winner, claim prize, $100 million. I did not scream. In movies, people scream. They jump up and down. They pop champagne. They call their best friends. They run out into the street. I did none of those things. I sat down on the edge of my sofa, very slowly. The room went completely silent. The sound of the rain against the window seemed to stop, or perhaps my brain just filtered it out. I felt a coldness spread from my fingertips up my arms, settling deep in my chest. It was the same physical sensation I had felt once when I was involved in a minor car accident. The moment of impact when time stretches and the world becomes hyper-real and terrifyingly still. $100 million. I looked at the ticket in my hand. It was just a piece of paper. It felt no heavier than it had 10 seconds ago. But now, it was dangerous. I looked back at the phone. I refreshed the app. The confetti exploded again. $100 million. I stood up and walked to my laptop. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I opened the browser. I went to the official state lottery website. I typed in the serial number manually, character by character, checking each digit 3 times. Enter. The screen loaded. Jackpot winner found. $100 million. I closed the laptop. I sat in the silence of my apartment, and I realized that I wasn't happy. Happiness is a light emotion. It bubbles. This was heavy. This was lead. I thought about my mother's face when she handed me this ticket, the smirk, the performative pity. Maybe you will get lucky. She had bought the ticket. She had handed it to me, in front of 30 witnesses. I looked at the wall. But I saw the future. I saw the lawsuits. I saw the claims. I saw the sudden, cloying affection that would drown me the moment this news got out. Oh, Avery, darling, we always knew you were special. We bought that ticket for you. It is a family win. And then, a different feeling rose up through the shock. It was cold and hard, like steel. It was power. For 33 years, I had been begging for a seat at their table. I had been serving their food, cleaning their messes, desperate for them to look at me and see something of value. I had measured my worth in their approval, and they had given me none. Now, I was worth $100 million. I did not need them to invite me to the cruise. I did not need them to like my salad. I did not need them to validate my career. I could buy the cruise line. I could buy the building Grant's firm rented. I don't need them anymore. The thought was liberating, but it was also terrifying, because I knew them. I knew Grant. I knew the documents I had photographed in the study. If they would steal a house from a 90-year-old woman for $200,000, what would they do for $100 million? They would destroy me. They would claim it was a mistake. They would claim the ticket was never a gift. They would say I stole it. I needed to move. I needed to do something. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I started to type. What to do when you win the lottery. The search results populated instantly. Hire a financial advisor. Tell no one. Sign the back of the ticket. I reached for a pen to sign the back of the ticket, but my hand froze in midair. I remembered Evelyn. I remembered the look in her eyes as she was being dragged out of the living room, the sharpness, the intelligence, the command. Do not leave without the bag. Evelyn didn't just give me cookies. She gave me a strategy. I stood up and ran to my bedroom. The old leather bag was sitting on the floor of my closet, where I had hidden it the night of Thanksgiving, beneath a pile of winter coats. I hauled it out. I opened the clasp. Inside, there were the things I expected. Old photo albums, a scarf, a small box of jewelry, but there was also a thick manila envelope tucked into the lining. I opened it. There were papers inside, old papers, and clipped to the front was a business card. The card was cream-colored, heavy stock, with simple black lettering. Elliot Vance, attorney at law, asset protection estate planning. There was a handwritten note on the back of the card in Evelyn's script. The strong, unwavering script from 10 years ago, not the shaky scrawl from the loan document. When the wolves come, call him. I stared at the card. When the wolves come, the wolves were not coming. They were already here. They were wearing suits and drinking scotch in my father's study. I looked at the time. It was 7 p.m. Most law offices were closed. I dialed the number on the card anyway. It rang once, twice. I expected a voicemail. I expected a receptionist. Instead, a man's voice answered. It was clear, deep, and startlingly alert. "This is Elliot Vance." I swallowed, my throat dry. "Mr. Vance," I said, "my name is Avery Alexander. I am calling because my grandmother, Evelyn Price." I stopped. I didn't know what to say. I won the lottery? My family is stealing a house? There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence that felt heavy with recognition. "Avery," Elliot said. His voice dropped, losing its professional edge and becoming something more urgent. "I have been wondering when I would hear from you." I froze. "You know who I am?" "I have been your grandmother's attorney for 20 years, he said. "And I know about the Thanksgiving dinner. I know about the cruise." "How?" I asked. How could he know? "Because Evelyn called me." He said, "She called me from the nurse's station phone 3 minutes before they took her phone away." My grip on the phone tightened. "Mr. Vance," I said, "I have found something in my father's study, and I have something else." I looked at the lottery ticket sitting on the coffee table. "I need to see you," I said, immediately. "Can you come to my office tonight?" he asked. "I am still here. I can be there in 20 minutes. I said, "And Avery?" "Yes?" "Don't tell anyone you are coming. Don't tell your parents. Don't tell your sister. And for God's sake, do not tell Grant Huxley." "I won't," I said. "Good," he said. "Because the papers you saw in the study? That is just the tip of the iceberg. Evelyn's house isn't just a house, and the will that Grant thinks exists? It's not the real one." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "We will talk when you get here," Elliot said, "but you need to understand something before you walk through my door. You think you are walking into a legal battle over a house. You aren't." He paused, and his next words made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "You are walking into a war. And that bag you have? It's the ammunition. I hung up the phone. I looked at the lottery ticket one last time. $100 million. I picked it up and slipped it into the inside pocket of my jacket, right next to my heart. Then I picked up the leather bag. I walked to the door. I checked the peephole. I checked the lock. I had thought the money was the headline. I had thought the $100 million was the twist in the story. I was wrong. The money was just the war chest. The real story was buried in the files of a lawyer I had never met, concerning a grandmother who had been playing a long game I was only just beginning to see. I turned off the lights in my apartment. I walked out into the rain. I wasn't Avery the gardener anymore. I wasn't Avery the stagehand. I was the one holding the detonator. The office of Elliot Vance was located in a brick building downtown that had survived 3 separate urban renewal projects. Standing stubborn and unmoving amidst a sea of glass skyscrapers, it was exactly the kind of place Evelyn would trust. When I walked in, the air smelled of lemon oil, dust, and the specific, dry scent of old paper, the smell of history being preserved. It was quiet, not the uncomfortable silence of my parents' living room, where words were withheld as punishment, but a disciplined silence, the kind that comes from knowing exactly what you are doing. Elliot Vance was waiting for me. He was a man in his 60s with silver hair combed back severely, and a suit that looked like it had been tailored 30 years ago and maintained perfectly ever since. He did not smile when I entered. He stood up, extended a hand, and gripped mine with a firmness that felt like an anchor. "Ms. Alexander," he said, "please, sit down." I sat in a leather chair that creaked under my weight. I placed the leather bag on the floor between my feet, feeling its bulk against my ankles. Elliot sat behind a massive oak desk. There was no computer in front of him, just a single, thick file folder. The tab on the folder was yellowed with age, and the label was typed on a typewriter, the ink slightly uneven. Avery Alexander. I stared at the file. "You have a file on me?" I asked. My voice was raspy. I had not spoken to anyone since the phone call an hour ago. Elliot placed his hand on the folder. "I have had this file since you were 16 years old." "Avery," I blinked. "Since I was 16? At 16, I was invisible. I was the girl in the background of Lydia's prom photos. I was the one studying in the library while the family went to the beach house." Elliot opened the folder. "Evelyn came to me 17 years ago." He said, "She was worried. She saw things in your family dynamic that she did not like. She saw how your mother treated you. She saw how your father deferred to your mother, and she saw how Lydia was being groomed to consume everything in her path." He pulled out a document. It was a trust agreement. "Evelyn established the Avery Alexander Preservation Trust the year you got your driver's license." Elliot continued, "It is not a fortune. Mind you, Evelyn was comfortable, but she was not an oil tycoon. But she put aside stocks, bonds, small dividends. She funneled them here, into this account, specifically so that your mother would never know they existed." "Why?" I asked. "Why hide it?" Elliot looked at me over the rim of his reading glasses. "Because Evelyn knew her daughter. She told me. If Martha knows Avery has money, Martha will find a way to make that money about the family, and then it will be gone." I felt a lump form in my throat. I had spent my entire life believing I was the afterthought. I thought Evelyn loved me. Sure, but I assumed she viewed me the same way the others did, as the nice, quiet one who didn't need much. I was wrong. She hadn't ignored me. She had been protecting me. She had been building a firewall around me for nearly 2 decades, waiting for the moment I would need it. Elliot leaned forward. "She wanted you to have a safety net. Avery, she told me that you were the only one with the spine to stand up to them. But you lacked the leverage. She was waiting until she passed to give this to you, but circumstances have changed." He closed the file and pulled out a second. Much newer folder. This one was red. "Now, let us talk about the war," he said. He slid a document across the desk. It was a photocopy of a durable power of attorney. I recognized the date immediately. September 14th. I looked at it. This is what they made her sign. I said, "When she was in the hospital, Elliot nodded grimly. Precisely. This document grants your father, and by extension, your mother, full control over her assets in the event of incapacitation. The problem, Avery, is that they have declared her incapacitated based on a very loose interpretation of a doctor's note from that fall. They are using this to liquidate her life while she is still breathing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I have more. I said. I opened the gallery and placed the phone on the desk. I swiped to the photo of the loan agreement, the one with Huxley Capital Services, the one with the 18% interest rate. Elliot looked at the screen. He adjusted his glasses. He leaned in closer. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Then, Elliot let out a low, sharp exhale. 18%, he muttered. Secured by a primary residence of a senior citizen, and the lender is a related party hidden behind a shell LLC. He looked up at me, and there was a glint of predatory focus in his eyes. This is not just unethical, Avery. This is predatory lending. It is a conflict of interest so flagrant that it borders on criminal fraud. Grant Huxley is lending money to his father-in-law, knowing his father-in-law cannot pay it back, and securing it with the grandmother's house, which the father-in-law only controls via a dubious power of attorney. He sat back, steepling his fingers. If we can prove that Evelyn was under the influence of heavy narcotics when she signed that power of attorney, the whole chain of authority collapses. If the power of attorney is void, then your father had no right to pledge the house. If he had no right to pledge the house, the lien is invalid, and Grant Huxley's 18% loan becomes an unsecured debt that your father is personally liable for. That destroys my father. I said, yes, Elliot said simply. It does, and it exposes Grant to a bar investigation and potential lawsuits from other investors. He looked at me. Are you prepared to do that? I thought about the way Grant had laughed at the dinner table. Luck is the only strategy left for people who lack the competence. I thought about my mother throwing the ticket at me. Yes, I said. I am. Good, Elliot said. Because we are going to file an emergency injunction to halt any transfer of the property. We are going to allege elder abuse and financial exploitation. We are going to freeze everything. He paused, his eyes drifting to the pocket of my jacket. Now, tell me about the other thing, the thing you mentioned on the phone. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the ticket. I placed it on the mahogany desk. It looked small and ridiculous against the expanse of wood. I scanned it. I said, I checked the website. It is the single winner. $100 million. Elliot did not touch the ticket. He stared at it. He did not smile. If anything, he looked more serious than he had when discussing the fraud. Avery, listen to me very carefully, he said. He leaned across the desk, his voice dropping to a whisper. This ticket is a nuclear bomb, but if you handle it wrong, it will blow up in your face. I don't understand. I said, it is my ticket. My mother gave it to me. That is the problem, Elliot said. Your mother gave it to you. She bought it. Do you have a receipt? No. Does she? Probably. She keeps receipts for everything. Elliot nodded. Here's the scenario. You claim this money tomorrow. You go on the news with a big check. Your family sees it. What do? They sue you. They claim that the ticket was a family asset. They claim that your mother asked you to hold it for her. They claim that it was a joke gift, and that there was no donative intent to transfer a winning asset of that magnitude. Donative intent? I asked. It is a legal concept, Elliot explained. Did the giver intend to give the full value of the gift? They will argue that they gave you a $2 piece of paper as a gag, not the rights to $100 million, with a pot this big. Juries get unpredictable, and your family, they have resources, or at least, Grant thinks he does. They will tie you up in court for 5 years. They will freeze your assets. I felt the blood drain from my face. So what do? Tear it up? No, Elliot said. We disappear. He opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh legal pad. We are going to create a blind trust, a limited liability company. We will call it something boring and unrelated to you, the Blue Heron Management Group or something similar. I will act as the trustee. The trust will claim the prize. Your name will not appear on the Lottery Commission's press release. Your face will not be on the news. He started writing rapidly on the pad. The money goes into the trust. The trust pays the taxes. The trust distributes the funds to you quietly, over time, or into other accounts that are shielded, to the world, and to your family. You are still Avery, the landscape architect. You are still the girl who got a $2 ticket that turned out to be a loser. I have to lie to them? I asked. You have to omit the truth. Elliot corrected. Until we have secured Evelyn's house, until we have invalidated that power of attorney, if they know you have $100 million, they will not care about the house anymore. They will come for you. They will play nice. They will gaslight you. They will try to guilt you into paying off Grant's debts. He looked me in the eye. Money changes people, Avery. But $100 million does not change who people are. It magnifies them. Your family is already predatory. If they smell blood in the water, they will never stop feeding. I nodded slowly. The logic was cold, but it was sound. If I revealed the win now, the narrative would shift. I would be the greedy daughter refusing to share, but if I stayed silent, if I stayed poor, I could fight them on the moral high ground. I could save Evelyn because it was the right thing to do, not because I was a rich savior. Do it, I said. Set up the trust. Elliot nodded. Good. I will have the papers ready for you to sign in the morning. We will claim the prize next week, after the holiday weekend, when the news cycle is distracted. He closed the notepad. Now, there is one last thing. He pointed to the leather bag at my feet. Evelyn told me you would bring that. I looked down at the bag. It sat there, heavy and worn. She said she smuggled it out. She said do not leave without it. Elliot reached into his drawer again and pulled out a small, folded piece of notepaper. It was sealed with a piece of Scotch tape. She gave this to me 6 months ago. Elliot said, she said, if Avery ever comes to your office with my bag, give her this. I took the note. My hands were trembling again. I peeled back the tape. The handwriting was shaky. It was from recent months. But the message was clear. Avery, if you are reading this, you have the bag. Good. They think the house is the only thing I have left. They are wrong. The papers in the study are the crime. The bag is the motive. Look in the lining of the bottom, not the main pocket, the false bottom. And remember, the wolf does not know it is a wolf until it is hungry. They are starving. My dear. Love. Grandma. I looked up at Elliot. A false bottom? I asked. Elliot stood up. I think you should look. I pulled the bag onto my lap. I emptied the photo albums and the scarf. I felt the bottom of the bag. It felt solid. But when I pressed my thumb into the corner, I felt a slight give, a ridge. I ran my finger along the seam. There was a tiny, almost invisible zipper hidden under the fabric fold. I pulled the zipper. It hissed open. I reached my hand into the dark space between the leather and the lining. My fingers brushed against something cool and metallic. And then, something paper. I pulled it out. It was a blue folder, but it wasn't a legal document. It was a medical file. And clipped to it was a handwritten journal. I opened the journal to the first page. It was dated 3 years ago. Grant asked me about the accounts again today. The entry read, he thinks I do not know he has been accessing the online banking. He transferred $5,000 to a consulting fee. I will not say anything yet. I need to see how far he goes. I turned the page. March 12th. Martha asked if I had updated my will. She brought me tea. It tasted bitter. I poured it in the plant. The plant died 2 days later. I gasped. The sound sucked the air out of the room. Elliot watched me, his face grim. You see, Avery, he said softly, this didn't start with the loan, and it didn't start with the lottery ticket. I looked at the journal, at the terrifying record of a woman watching her own family slowly encircle her like vultures. She hadn't been senile. She had been a spy in her own home. I looked up at Elliot. They have been planning this for years, I whispered. And now, Elliot said, closing the red file on his desk with a definitive thud, we are going to finish it. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked street. Go home. Avery, put the ticket in a safety deposit box. Do not talk to them. When they call you from the ship to ask about the nurse, you answer, you be polite, you be the good little stagehand. He turned back to me, and for the first time, a small, cold smile touched his lips. Let them enjoy their cruise. Let them drink their champagne, because when they get back to shore, we are going to be waiting on the dock, and we are going to take everything. The Bon Voyage party was held on a Sunday, 3 days before the ship was scheduled to depart from the Miami port. My mother had decided that a simple family dinner was insufficient for such a momentous occasion as her favorite daughter going on a vacation. So she had escalated the event into a full-scale production. The theme was nautical elegance. This meant I spent 4 hours on Saturday afternoon hanging navy blue streamers, arranging centerpieces made of white rope and seashells, and confirming the catering order for 3 dozen crab cakes that cost more than my monthly car payment. I arrived at the house at 10 in the morning to oversee the setup. I was wearing my costume, beige slacks, a nondescript polo shirt, and sensible shoes. I looked like staff. That was the point. For the last 3 days, since my meeting with Elliot Vance, I had been practicing the art of being entirely unthreatening. I needed them to see me as they had always seen me. Avery the reliable. Avery the dull. Avery the doormat. If they sensed even a flicker of the $100 million currently sitting in a blind trust awaiting my final signature, or the legal injunction Elliot was preparing to file against the property title, they would strike, and I needed them to leave the state before the war began. Grant was the first one to approach me. I was in the dining room, adjusting the placement of the napkins, folding them into the shape of sailboats, per my mother's request, when I smelled the heavy, peaty scent of his scotch. It was barely noon. "Avery," he said. His voice was too loud for the empty room. I turned. Grant was leaning against the doorframe, wearing a white linen suit that made him look like a plantation owner from a bad movie. He was swirling his drink, his eyes scanning me with a mixture of boredom and calculation. "Grant," I said, keeping my voice flat, "can I get you anything?" He laughed. Walking into the room, No, I am good. Just wanted to see how the other half lives." He gestured vaguely at the napkins. "You are good at this menial stuff," he said. "It is a talent. Really, detail-oriented. Thank you," I said. He took a sip of his drink, watching me over the rim of the glass. "So," he said casually, "did you buy any more tickets?" I paused, my hand hovering over a linen sailboat. I felt a spike of adrenaline, but I forced my heartbeat to slow down. I turned to look at him, widening my eyes in a performance of innocent embarrassment. "No," I said. "I think I learned my lesson. $2 is a lot to waste on a fantasy." Grant smirked. He looked satisfied. "Good girl. That is the thing about gambling. Avery, it is a tax on the stupid. People like us, well, people like Lydia and me, we build wealth. We do not bet on it." He took a step closer, invading my personal space. "Speaking of building," he said, lowering his voice, "I have an opportunity coming up. A private equity fund, high entry barrier. But for family, I could maybe pull some strings. If you have any savings tucked away, maybe that little retirement account you have at the firm, I could double it in a year." I stared at him. He was trying to drain me dry. He had already leveraged Evelyn's house to the hilt, and now, before leaving on a luxury cruise, he was trying to scrape the bottom of my 401k barrel. It was not just greed. It was a pathology. "I will think about it." I lied, "But cash is a little tight right now." He nodded, losing interest immediately. "Right. Well, let me know. I hate to see capital sitting idle." He walked away, leaving me alone with the sailboat napkins. I watched his back, the white linen stretched tight across his shoulders. You have no idea. I thought, my capital is not idle. It is just waiting for the right moment to buy your destruction. By 6 in the evening, the party was in full swing. The house was filled with the usual cast of characters, loud uncles, envious cousins, and neighbors who came for the free wine. I spent the night circulating with a tray of appetizers, refilling glasses, and dodging questions about why I wasn't going on the cruise. You know Avery, Aunt Celeste whispered to me near the kitchen. She prefers the quiet. I caught Celeste's eye. She looked terrified. She had been avoiding me since our text exchange, terrified that her complicity would be discovered. I gave her a small, reassuring nod, then moved on. Toward the end of the night, as the guests were beginning to filter out, my mother cornered me in the foyer. She was holding a clipboard. "Avery, darling," she said, her voice dripping with that frantic hostess fatigue. "Before you go, I need you to sign a few things." She thrust the clipboard at me. "What is this?" I asked. "Oh, just standard things," she said, waving her hand. "Instructions for the alarm system, the contact info for the pool guy, and a little waiver for the insurance company. Since you will be the only one in the house for 10 days, our broker suggested we just have a document stating you are authorized to be on the premises." I looked at the document on top. It was indeed a list of emergency numbers, but underneath it, peeking out just slightly, was a second page with a denser block of text. I lifted the first page. The second document was titled Family Asset and Liability Waiver. I scanned the text quickly. It was filled with legal jargon, but one paragraph jumped out at me. Undersigned acknowledges that any assets, financial instruments, or gratuities received, discovered, or held within the primary residence or by any family member during the designated period, shall be considered common property of the Alexander estate. My blood ran cold. It was a trap. A clumsy, hastily written trap, probably drafted by Grant the night before. If I signed this, and then later claimed the lottery money, they could argue that because the ticket was technically held by me, a family member, while I was acting as the steward of the estate, it fell under this clause. Or worse, they could argue the ticket itself was discovered property of the estate. They were terrified. They didn't know I had won. But they were terrified I might have won, or that I might find something else of value in the house while they were gone. I looked up at my mother. She was smiling, but her eyes were tight. She was watching my pen hand. "Just sign it. Avery," she said, "it is just a formality. Grant says we need it for liability." I lowered the clipboard. "I need to read it first." "Mom," I said. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she snapped, her mask slipping. "It is not a contract. It is a house-sitting agreement." "Why do you have to be so difficult?" "Because I am responsible," I said, using their own favorite word against them. "You always say I am the responsible one. Responsible people read what they sign." I unclipped the papers and folded them, shoving them into my purse. "I will take it home, read it over tonight, and bring it back tomorrow when I come to check the mail." "No. Avery, wait," she started, reaching for my bag. I stepped back. "Good night. Mom, have a wonderful trip." I turned and walked out the door before she could stop me. I could feel her eyes drilling into my back. They were desperate, and desperation made them sloppy. The next morning, the day of their departure, I made one stop before going to the law office. I went to the assisted living facility where they had dumped Evelyn 2 years ago. The facility was clean, sterile, and smelled of antiseptic and loneliness. Evelyn was in her room, sitting in a wheelchair by the window, staring out at the parking lot. She looked frailer than she had at Thanksgiving. The fight at the dinner table had taken a toll on her reserves. I walked in and closed the door. "Grandma?" I whispered. She turned. Her eyes were milky, but when they landed on me, they sharpened. "Avery," she rasped. I pulled a chair close to her and took her hand. It felt like a bundle of dry twigs. "They are leaving today," I said. "The cruise? Good," she said. "Let them go. The farther the better." I leaned in closer. "I went to see Elliot," I said, and I opened the bag. I found the false bottom. Evelyn squeezed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You found the blue folder?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "And the journal?" She nodded, closing her eyes for a moment as if a great weight had been lifted from her chest. "Then you have the original," she whispered. I paused. "The original what?" "Grandma?" I asked. "I found the medical files. I found the journal." She opened her eyes. The deed. Avery. The original deed to the house. And the original revocation of power of attorney. I frowned. I saw the revocation. I said, but the deed. It is taped inside the back cover of the journal, she said, under the leather flap. I hadn't looked there. Grant has a copy, she continued, her voice gaining strength. He thinks he has the original. He stole a set of papers from my desk last year. But he is a fool. He didn't check the watermarks. He has a color photocopy. The original deed, the one with the raised seal from 1962, is in your bag. Without that, his bank cannot foreclose. He can't sell. He can't do anything. I stared at her. She hadn't just documented the crime. She had physically removed the object of the crime from their reach. And the revocation? I asked. I signed it a week before the fall. She said, I had a moment of clarity. I knew they were plotting. I signed a document revoking all previous powers of attorney and naming Elliot. But I didn't file it yet because I was afraid they would find out and put me in a home. She let out a bitter laugh. They put me here anyway. But that document, it proves that when they made me sign the new one in the hospital, I had already stripped them of the power to ask. I understood. The timeline was the weapon. I have it. I said, I have it all. She pulled me down and kissed my forehead. Be smart. Avery, they will come back hungry. I left the facility with a fire in my chest. I drove straight to Elliot Vance's office. The atmosphere in the office was different this time. It was not the somber mood of discovery. It was the sharp, kinetic energy of execution. Elliot had the papers spread out on the conference table. The blind trust, he said, pointing to a stack of documents. We are calling it the Verdant Horizon Group. Vague enough to sound like landscaping, corporate enough to be boring. I sat down. I picked up the pen. I signed my name, Avery Alexander. With that signature, I transferred the ownership of the winning ticket to the LLC. I signed the tax forms. I signed the directive for the lump sum payment. $62 million after taxes. Elliot said, it will be wired to the trust account within 48 hours. Then, we moved to the second stack. The injunction. Elliot said, and the quiet title action. I signed the affidavit stating that I had possession of the original deed. I signed the complaint alleging fraud, elder abuse, and predatory lending against Huxley Capital Services. We file these tomorrow morning. Elliot said, as soon as the ship leaves U.S. territorial waters. By the time they check their email, the house will be frozen, and a judge will be reviewing the medical records. I put the pen down. My hand was steady. It is done. I said. Elliot nodded. It is done. Now, you go home. You wait. And you let them realize that the locks have been changed. I drove back to my apartment. It was 7 p.m. The sun had set. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I looked at the screen. Lydia. I let it ring. It stopped. It buzzed again. A text message. Avery, are you there? Pick up. Another text. Avery, seriously, it is an emergency. I pulled into my parking spot. I turned off the engine. I picked up the phone. Card declined at the port bar. Grant's accounts are flagged for some security reason because of the travel. Can you Venmo me $500? Just until we sort it out on the ship. Please, people are staring. I stared at the screen. The platinum package. The owner's suite. The wealth management consultant. And they were stuck at a port bar with a declined card, begging the gardener for $500. It was pathetic. And it was perfect. For 10 years. Every time Lydia asked for money, I gave it. I gave it because I wanted to buy my way into their good graces. I gave it because I thought if I was useful, I would be loved. I looked at the message. I could see Lydia standing there in her sequin dress, tapping her foot, embarrassed, waiting for her little sister to save her. I typed a reply. Sorry. Lydia. Cash is tight right now. I spent my last $2 on a lottery ticket. I deleted it. Too snarky. Too revealing. I typed a new message. Sorry. I can't. I deleted that too. Too weak. I typed 2 words. Ask Grant. I hit send. I watched the little bubble indicate that the message had been delivered. I waited for the explosion. I waited for the angry reply, the guilt trip, the call from my mother screaming about selfishness, but nothing came. The phone stayed silent. I realized then that they weren't just angry. They were afraid. For the first time, I had said no. And a servant who says no is a servant who has realized they are holding the keys. They got on that ship thinking they were leaving a compliant victim behind. They didn't know they were leaving behind a millionaire with a legal team and a map of their crimes. I went into my apartment. I poured myself a glass of cheap wine. I sat on the sofa and looked at the empty space on the coffee table where the ticket had been. I raised my glass to the empty room. Bon voyage. I whispered, I hope they enjoyed the buffet. It was going to be the last free meal they ever got. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. 3 days after the cruise ship, the Emerald Princess, had departed from Miami. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee that tasted like metal because my adrenaline had not dipped below baseline in 72 hours. I was scrolling through the local news feed on my tablet when the headline hit me. Mystery winner. Single ticket sold in Raleigh claims, historic jackpot. The article was vague. It speculated on the identity of the winner. It interviewed the clerk at the gas station, a place called Pete's Stop on the corner of Oak and Vine. The clerk, a man with a thick beard and a penchant for chewing tobacco, told the reporter that he remembered selling a lot of tickets that week. But he specifically remembered a nice lady in a fancy coat buying a handful for gifts. My stomach turned over. A nice lady in a fancy coat. My mother. The gas station was less than 2 miles from the Alexander estate. I put the tablet down. I knew what was coming. The silence of the last few days had been the calm before the artillery barrage. It started, as all family tragedies do in the modern age, in the group chat, the Alexander family updates thread, usually reserved for birthday emojis and passive-aggressive reminders about holiday scheduling. Lit up, Cousin Greg, the one who worked in insurance and thought he was a comedian, posted a screenshot of the article. Hey, isn't this right near Uncle Robert's house? Anyone we know rich and not telling us? LOL. A few laugh emojis followed. Aunt Celeste posted a shocked face. Then, silence. My mother did not post in the group chat. My father did not post. Grant did not post. 2 minutes later, a notification slid down from the top of my screen. It was a direct message from my mother. Hey, honey. Hope the house is okay. We are having a lovely time. The internet is spotty here. I stared at the screen. Honey. She hadn't called me honey since I was 6 years old. The typing bubble appeared again. It danced for a long time, appearing and disappearing, as if she was drafting and redrafting the perfect sentence. I just saw a funny news story about a lottery winner near us. It reminded me of that silly gag gift I gave you. You know, just for a laugh. Did you ever scratch that thing? Or is it still sitting in your coat pocket? The casualness was terrifying. It was the surgical precision of a predator trying not to startle its prey. She wasn't asking if I won. She was asking if I still had possession of the asset. I put the phone down. I let it sit. I unloaded the dishwasher. I watered my basil plants. I paced the length of my apartment. I needed them to sweat. I needed the anxiety to build in their chests until it felt like a heart attack. 3 hours later, I picked up the phone. I typed a single word. Yes. I did not say yes. I won. I did not say yes. It is $100 million. I just said yes. I hit send. The reaction was instantaneous. It was nuclear. My phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. My father. Voicemail. Then a text from Grant. Avery, pick up the phone. We need to discuss the tax implications before you do anything stupid. Then a text from Lydia. Ave, please answer. Mom is hyperventilating. Just tell us what is going on. Then the extended family joined in. Calls from numbers I hadn't spoken to in years. A second cousin who owed me money. An aunt who had forgotten my name at the last reunion. The phone buzzed and vibrated across the coffee table like a dying insect. I sat there and watched it. I felt a cold. detached fascination. This was not love. This was not excitement for my good fortune. This was the sound of sharks sensing blood in the water. Then, my other phone rang. The burner phone I had bought specifically for Elliot Vance. I picked it up immediately. "Elliot," I said. "Avery, we have a complication." Elliot said. His voice was tight, stripped of its usual calm legal authority. "What is it? Did the trust paperwork fail?" "No. The trust is fine. The money is secure. But 5 minutes ago, my contact at the Lottery Commission called me." He paused, and I heard the rustle of papers. "Someone contacted the commission this morning, an attorney based in Miami, representing an anonymous claimant." I frowned. "But I am the claimant. We already submitted the claim." "Yes," Elliot said, "but this attorney filed a preemptive dispute. He claims that his client, a Mrs. Martha Alexander, purchased a winning ticket at Pete's Stop, and that the ticket was either lost, stolen, or inadvertently transferred without donative intent. They are asking the commission to flag the serial number and freeze the payout pending an investigation." The room seemed to tilt. "They did what?" I whispered. "They filed the dispute 4 hours ago. Avery, before you even texted your mother back." I felt the blood drain from my face. They didn't wait for me to confirm. They saw the news article, realized the location and timing matched, and immediately assumed I might have won. And their first instinct, their immediate, visceral reflex, was not to call and congratulate me. It was to call a lawyer and block me from getting the money. They had tried to rob me before they even knew if there was anything to steal. "It is a blocking move," Elliot continued. "They are trying to freeze the asset so they can strong-arm you into a settlement. They want to scare you. They want you to think you legally can't touch the money." "Grant," I said. "This has Grant written all over it." "Likely," Elliot agreed. "But here's the good news. They filed the dispute against the physical ticket number. They do not know the ticket has already been assigned to the Verdant Horizon Group. They are suing Avery Alexander, but Avery Alexander does not hold the ticket anymore. The trust does. So what does that mean?" "It means they are firing bullets at a ghost," Elliot said, "but it also means the war has started earlier than we thought. They are coming for you, Avery, and they are coming hard." I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like clarity. My phone buzzed again. It was Lydia. "Please, just talk to me. Grant is going crazy. He is screaming at Mom." I looked at the message. Lydia, my sister, the golden child who had stood by while they laughed at me. Was she part of this, or was she just another pawn? I decided to test the structural integrity of her loyalty. I pressed call. Lydia picked up on the first ring. The background noise was chaotic. Wind, distant music, and the muffled sound of shouting. "Avery! Oh my God! Avery! Why aren't you answering?" Her voice was high, brittle. She sounded like she had been crying. "I was busy," I said calmly. "Busy? Avery, did you see the news? Mom says that is her ticket. She says she bought it." I let the silence hang there for 5 seconds. "It was a gift. Lydia. She gave it to me. You were there. You saw her hand it to me. You heard everyone laugh." "I know," Lydia cried. "I know. Okay? But Grant is on the phone with his legal team. He says there is a precedent for imperfect gifts. He says if Mom didn't intend to give you $100 million, then the transfer is invalid. He is drafting an affidavit for Mom to sign right now. An affidavit. They were on a vacation, in the middle of the ocean, drafting legal documents to strip me of my fortune. "Lydia," I said, my voice dropped to a whisper, "why are you telling me this?" "Because it is scary." "Avery," Lydia sobbed. "Grant isn't acting like himself. He looks dangerous. He threw a glass against the wall when he saw the news report. He is scared." "Lydia," I said, "why would he be scared? We are rich. If you won, we are all rich. Right? That is what families do. Families." I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Lydia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "What?" Do you know about Grandma's house? The line went dead silent. The wind noise stopped, as if she had cupped her hand over the phone. What about Grandma's house? She asked. Her voice was too quiet, too controlled. I am asking you, Lydia, did you know that Grant made Dad sign the house over as collateral for a loan? Did you know that they forged her signature on a power of attorney while she was drugged in the hospital? I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Avery, stop. That is not true. Grant manages the accounts. He takes care of everything. Did you know? I pressed. I knew there was a loan, she stammered. Grant said it was a bridge loan, to help Dad with cash flow. He said Grandma's house was just leverage. It was just on paper. He said we would pay it back before anyone knew. So you knew. I said, you knew they put a 90-year-old woman's home on the betting table. Avery, you do not understand business, Lydia screamed, her defense mechanism kicking in. It is complicated. Grant knows what he is doing. Does he? I asked, because from where I'm standing, it looks like he's about to lose everything. Avery, don't. I hung up. She knew. She might not have known the details or the extent of the fraud, but she knew the house was in play. She had let herself remain ignorant because the ignorance came with cruise tickets and designer handbags. She was just as guilty as the rest of them. I sat there, feeling the last tether of familial obligation snap. I was floating in the void now. Then, a new notification popped up. It was not a text. It was a voicemail from the landline at the assisted living facility. I pressed play. There was a crackle of static, then the voice of the head nurse. Mrs. Higgins, Ms. Alexander. Your grandmother insisted I send this. She is quite agitated. One moment, then a shuffling sound, and Evelyn's voice. It was weak, breathless, but fierce. Avery, it's me. The nurse told me she saw the news on the TV in the break room. About the winner. A pause, a ragged breath. Don't listen to them. They called here. Your mother called the front desk. She wanted to know if I had talked to you recently. She wanted to know if you had visited. She sounded like a madwoman. Another pause. The bag. Avery, don't let them touch the bag. The money is just paper. The bag is the lock on their cage. If they get the bag, they get away with it. Do you hear me? Keep it safe. The recording ended. I stared at the phone. My mother had called the nursing home. She was checking the perimeter. She was trying to figure out if I had been to see Evelyn, if the two outcasts had joined forces. They were terrified of the bag. They knew that if I had the money and the evidence, they were finished. I looked at the time. It was 4 p.m. I could run. I could turn off my phone, drive to a hotel, and wait for Elliot to file the injunctions. I could disappear into the safety of my anonymous trust, but that felt like hiding. And I was done hiding. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to see them when the trap snapped shut. I opened the group chat again. The messages were piling up. Conspiracy theories. Pleas for me to answer. Passive-aggressive guilt trips. I typed a new message. I'm not discussing this over text. The signal is too bad. And things are being misunderstood. I watched the read receipts pop up. Seen by Mom. Seen by Grant. Seen by Dad. Seen by Lydia. I typed again. Video call. Tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Everyone needs to be there. I have an announcement to make regarding the ticket and the future of the estate. I waited. The response came within 10 seconds. Grant. We will be there. Setting up in the business center now. Mom. Thank God. Avery, we just want to help you manage this. Dad. 8 o'clock. Don't be late. They agreed instantly. They didn't ask, are you okay? They didn't ask, is it true? They just agreed to the meeting time because they thought they had won. They thought that by agreeing to the call, I was submitting to the tribunal. They thought I was coming to them to ask for permission, to ask for guidance, to hand over the ticket like a good little girl who was overwhelmed by the big numbers. They thought the meeting was a negotiation. They didn't realize it was an arraignment. I stood up. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes, but there was something else in my expression that hadn't been there a week ago. I looked like Evelyn. I walked back to the living room. I set up my laptop on the dining table. I positioned the camera so that the background was blank. Just a white wall. No personal details. No hints of where I was. I opened my email. Elliot had sent the PDF files. Exhibit A, the Huxley Capital Loan Agreement. Exhibit B, the forged power of attorney. Exhibit C, the affidavit of ownership for the Verdant Horizon Group. I downloaded them. I saved them to a folder on my desktop labeled The Truth. I sat down and watched the clock. 7:55, 7:56. My heart was hammering, but my hands were still. I was about to blow up my life. I was about to incinerate the bridge back to the only family I had ever known. But looking at the empty chair where the leather bag had sat, I realized something. I wasn't burning a bridge. I was lighting a signal fire. I was letting the world know exactly who the Alexanders were. 7:59. I clicked the link to start the meeting. The screen went black, then flickered to life. I was ready. The video call connected with a digital chime that sounded absurdly cheerful given the circumstances. My screen flickered from black to a high-definition view of the owner's suite lounge on the Emerald Princess. The background was almost too perfect, like a green screen backdrop used for a travel infomercial. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind them, the Atlantic Ocean was a deep, bruising purple under a setting sun. The room was bathed in golden light. My parents, Grant, and Lydia were clustered around a laptop, presumably Grant's, which was propped up on a glass coffee table. They were ready. They had staged the tableau perfectly. My mother was wearing a silk caftan that billowed around her, holding a flute of champagne. My father was in a polo shirt, looking sun-flushed and anxious. Grant was front and center, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, radiating the intense, predatory focus of a man closing a deal. Lydia sat slightly behind him, looking pale despite the tan she was supposed to be getting. When my face appeared on their screen, just me, sitting against a blank white wall in my apartment, wearing a simple gray sweater, they all leaned in simultaneously. "Avery!" my mother cried out. Her voice was distorted by the compression algorithm, shrill and tinny. "We have been so worried. You look tired. We are just glad you finally picked up." Grant cut in, his voice smooth. "The internet connection out here is spotty, so let's not waste bandwidth. We saw the news. Avery," he paused, waiting for me to speak. He wanted me to confess. He wanted me to offer it up. I looked at them. I looked at the little pixelated box that contained my entire biological family. They looked small. "You saw the news." I repeated. My voice was steady. I had rehearsed this. "Yes," my father said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "About the winner. In Raleigh." "Is it true?" Lydia asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. I looked directly into the camera lens. "Yes," I said. "It is true. I have the ticket." The reaction was instantaneous. It was an explosion of relief and greed that transcended the digital divide. My mother let out a scream of delight. Clapping her hands together, my father slumped back in his chair, exhaling a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. Grant punched the air, a decisive, aggressive motion. "I knew it!" Grant shouted. "I knew it! I told you, Martha! I told you she wouldn't lose it! Oh, my baby!" My mother gushed, tears instantly springing to her eyes. Tears of joy for the money, not for me. "We are so proud of you. This is a miracle, a family miracle." "How much?" Grant asked. He cut through the celebration like a knife. The news said it was a single winner, but the estimated jackpot varies. "What is the final cash value?" "Avery?" I waited a beat. I wanted them to hear it. I wanted the number to hang in the air and suffocate them. $100 million. I said. The silence on the ship was absolute. The background noise of the ocean seemed to vanish. 100, my father stammered. 100 million. I confirmed. Before taxes, after the lump sum penalty and federal withholdings, it clears at roughly $62 million. My mother grabbed my father's arm to steady herself. Lydia put her hand over her mouth. "But Grant?" Grant didn't freeze. He activated. Okay, he said, his eyes widening. The pupils dilated. Okay, 62 million. That is workable. That is significant. He shifted his laptop, bringing his face closer to the camera. He switched instantly into his professional persona, the wealth management consultant, the man who knew how to handle big-picture capital, Avery. Listen to me very carefully. Grant said, do not, I repeat, do not, sign the back of that ticket yet. Do not go to the lottery office. We need to structure this. I started to say, but he barreled over me. No, listen, you are in shock. You are not thinking clearly. This kind of liquidity is dangerous if it is not insulated. We need to set up a family limited partnership. Immediately. I can have the papers drawn up by my team in Miami by tomorrow morning. We funnel the ticket into the partnership. That minimizes the estate tax exposure and allows us to distribute the dividends across the family members to lower the individual tax bracket hits. He was talking fast, his hands moving in the air, sculpting the imaginary money into piles he could control. I will manage the portfolio. Obviously, Grant continued, I will waive my usual 2% management fee for the first year. Because we are family. We will put 30% into high-yield bonds, 40% into emerging markets. Grant. Honey. That sounds wonderful, my mother chimed in, nodding vigorously. Avery, just listen to Grant. He knows exactly what to do. Family comes first. We have to protect the family. Family comes first, my father echoed, like a sleeper agent activated by a code phrase. Lydia just stared at the screen, her eyes darting between Grant's manic energy and my stone-cold face. I let them talk for another 30 seconds. I let them build the castle in the sky. I let them spend the money. I let them imagine the cars, the houses, the power. Then, I reached for my mouse. Stop, I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. Grant stopped mid-sentence. What? He asked, annoyed at the interruption. Avery, time is money. Literally, every day that ticket sits in your pocket is lost interest. I am not talking about the money. Grant. I said, not yet. Well, what else is there to talk about? My mother asked, laughing nervously. The truth. I said. I clicked the share screen button on the video call interface. The image of my face on their laptop was replaced by a PDF document. It was Exhibit A, the Huxley Capital Services Loan Agreement. What is this? My father squinted at the screen. I zoomed in. I highlighted the numbers. $210,000. I read aloud. Borrowed by Robert Alexander. Lended by Huxley Capital Services. Interest rate, 18%. The room on the ship went deadly quiet. My father's face turned a shade of gray that matched the ocean. My mother stopped breathing. Grant's expression shifted. The excitement vanished, replaced by a cold, hard mask. That is private financial data. Avery, Grant said, his voice dropping an octave. Where did you get that? That is a breach of... I scrolled down. I highlighted the signature. Grant Huxley. And here is the collateral. I said, property address, 404 Elm Street, the primary residence of Evelyn Price. Lydia made a sound. A small, choked gasp. She looked at Grant. You said, she whispered. You said it was just a bridge loan. You said the interest was nominal. 18% is not nominal. Lydia, I said, my voice coming through their speakers with crystal clarity, it is predatory. It is a loan designed to fail. I clicked to the next tab. Exhibit B, the power of attorney and the deed of trust. And this, I said, this is how they did it. I zoomed in on the date. September 14th. Grandma was admitted to St. Mary's Hospital on September 13th after a fall. I recited, reading from the notes I had prepared. She was administered heavy doses of painkillers. On September 14th, while she was documented as being disoriented and lethargic in her medical chart, this power of attorney was signed. I looked at the camera, knowing they could still see my face in the corner of their screen. You forged her consent. I said, You waited until she was drugged. And you used her hand to sign away her house to cover a debt that Grant tricked Dad into taking. My mother stood up. She looked furious. "How dare you?" she screamed. "We did what we had to do. You do not understand the pressure we were under. We were trying to save the family." "Save the family?" I asked. "Or save your country club membership?" "It is complicated," my father shouted. Finding his voice, "We intended to pay it back. When the market turned, the market didn't turn. Dad, I cut him off. Grant bet against you. He lent you money he knew you couldn't pay, so he could seize the one asset Grandma refused to sell. That is a lie." Grant barked. He stood up, towering over the laptop. "This is slander. Avery, if you repeat this to anyone, I will sue you for defamation. I will bury you in legal fees so deep you will never see a dime of that lottery money." "You think so?" I asked. I stopped sharing the screen. I switched to the audio player. "I have one more thing," I said. I pressed play. The audio was slightly grainy, recorded in a coffee shop, but the voices were unmistakable. It was Aunt Celeste speaking first, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to tell you, Avery, but I was there, at the Christmas party 2 years ago. I heard them on the patio. Then," a second voice cut in. It was a recording played from Celeste's phone, a voice memo she had taken by accident, or perhaps on purpose, during a family gathering. The voice was my mother's. "She is 90, Grant. She won't last forever. Just get her to sign the papers. If we have the house, we can leverage it for the credit line. She doesn't even know what she is signing half the time. Just tell her it is for her medical care. Everything will be fine." I stopped the recording. The silence on the ship was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a grave. My mother sank back onto the sofa. She looked old. The glamour of the caftan, the champagne, the cruise, it all looked cheap now. She had been exposed not just as greedy, but as cruel. Lydia stood up. She was shaking. She looked at our mother. Then she turned to Grant. "You told me," Lydia said, her voice cracking. "You told me Grandma wanted to help us. You told me she offered the house." Grant didn't look at her. He was staring at the screen, his jaw working. Lydia grabbed his arm. "Answer me," she screamed. "Did you steal her house? Am I just a part of the scam? Is that what I am? A shield?" Grant ripped his arm away. "Grow up. Lydia," he snapped. "Do you like the car you drive? Do you like this suite? Do you like the life I give you? It costs money. It requires strategy. Your grandmother is a vegetable sitting in a room waiting to die. Why shouldn't her assets be used to support the people who actually have a future?" Lydia recoiled, as if he had slapped her. She stepped back, hitting the glass table. She looked at him with horror, the kind of horror that comes when you finally see the monster under the bed and realize you have been sleeping next to it for 5 years. Grant turned back to the camera. He pointed a finger at me. "You listen to me, you little ungrateful brat," he hissed. "You think you can blackmail us? You are part of this family. If we go down, you go down. You think the press will care about the details? They will see a lottery winner letting her parents rot. You will be the villain." "No, Grant," I said. "I won't." I leaned into the camera. "Because I am not asking you to pay it back. I am paying it." Grant blinked. "You are?" "Yes," I said. "I have instructed my attorneys to satisfy the lien on 404 Elm Street. The debt is cleared." Grant let out a laugh. A short, disbelief-filled bark. "Well, there you go," he said, throwing his hands up. "See? Problem solved. You pay the debt. We keep the house. Everyone wins. I knew you were smart. Avery." I wasn't finished. I said, "I am paying the debt to remove the lien, but simultaneously, I am filing a petition to void the transfer of the deed based on the medical evidence of incapacitation, and I am filing a motion to remove Dad as the power of attorney and replace him with a court-appointed guardian." The smile fell off Grant's face. "What?" he whispered. "The house goes back to Evelyn." I said, "Not to Dad, not to you, to her. And since the transfer was fraudulent, The underlying collateral agreement is void, which means, Grant, that the $210,000 you lent Dad, that is now an unsecured personal loan. I looked at my father. And since Dad has no assets because you drained them all, and since I am certainly not giving him a dime of my winnings, I looked back at Grant. It looks like you just lost $200,000. And since you are under investigation for predatory lending practices, I imagine your other investors might want to start asking questions about their money too. Grant's face turned purple. You bitch, he snarled. You can't do that. It is already done. I said, the filings went in this morning. The moment you left the dock, you lost control. Grant looked at Lydia. Lydia was crying, silently, staring at the floor. Lydia, pack your bags, Grant ordered. We are going to the communications room. I need to call the firm. Lydia didn't move. Lydia! Grant shouted. I am not going anywhere with you, Lydia whispered. Grant stared at her. Then he looked at the screen. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. You will regret this. Avery, he said. He turned and stormed out of the lounge, the heavy door slamming behind him. My mother was sobbing now, her face buried in her hands. My father was staring out the window at the dark ocean, looking like a ghost. Avery, my mother wept. Please, we are your family. No, Mom, I said, you are my relatives. There is a difference. I reached for the button to end the call. Wait, my father cried, turning back. Avery, wait. What do we do? What are we supposed to do? I looked at them. They were stranded on a luxury ship, surrounded by wealth, yet completely bankrupt in every way that mattered. I don't know. Dad, I said, but I hear the buffet is open until midnight. I clicked end call. The screen went black. The room in my apartment was quiet. My heart was pounding in my chest, a rhythmic drumbeat of adrenaline and release. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank screen. I had stripped them naked. I had taken away their excuses, their lies, and their leverage. I had left them floating in the middle of the ocean with nothing but the truth. And the truth was, they had lost the only lottery that really mattered, the loyalty of the people who loved them. I closed my laptop. I picked up the phone and dialed Elliot Vance. It is done. I said, Good. Elliot replied, Now, get some sleep. Avery, the real work starts tomorrow. The 48 hours following the video call were a masterclass in panic management. When you pull the cornerstone out of a rotting building, it does not collapse all at once. It groans, it shifts, and then it implodes. I sat in my apartment and watched the implosion happen in real time, transmitted via screenshots, frantic voicemails, and the sudden sharp silence of the local rumor mill. My family tried to control the narrative. It was pathetic to watch. From the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, stuck on a ship that had become a floating prison of their own making, they tried to spin the story. My mother told her friends via Facebook Messenger, messages that were immediately screenshotted and forwarded to me by the few cousins who had decided to switch sides, that I was having a mental breakdown. She claimed the pressure of the win had made me paranoid, that I was fabricating documents to hurt the family because I had always been jealous of Lydia's success. My father took a different approach. He told his golf buddies that it was a misunderstanding regarding estate planning, a phrase that sounded dignified until you realized he was borrowing money from them to pay his bar tab on the ship. Grant, predictable to the end, went on the offensive. He sent a cease and desist letter to my personal email, drafted on his laptop, without a letterhead, claiming the documents I showed were digitally altered and that he would be filing a defamation suit the moment his feet touched American soil. They were loud, they were aggressive, they were desperate. But they forgot one thing. They weren't the only ones with secrets. The explosion didn't come from me. I didn't have to leak the documents to the press. I didn't have to call the authorities. I just had to wait. It came from a man named Marcus Thorne. I didn't know Marcus personally, but I knew his name. He was Grant's former business partner, a man who had dissolved their boutique firm 2 years ago under mysterious circumstances. Grant had always claimed Marcus was burned out and lacked vision. On Thursday morning, 12 hours before the Emerald Princess was due to dock in Fort Lauderdale, an article appeared in a prominent financial blog. The headline was dry, but the content was nuclear. Former partner alleging systematic predatory lending at local firm. Marcus Thorne had seen the news about the lottery winner. He had seen the rumors swirling about the Alexander family, and he decided that the statute of limitations on his silence had run out. He went on record. He didn't know about Evelyn specifically, but he knew the pattern. He detailed a system where Grant would target elderly homeowners, friends of his in-laws, people he met at church, and offer them complex, equity release loans that were mathematically designed to default. He provided emails. He provided spreadsheets. The article went viral locally within 3 hours. By noon, 2 other families had stepped forward in the comment section, sharing stories of how that nice young man Grant had helped them refinance, only for them to lose their vacation homes a year later. The narrative shifted instantly. I wasn't the crazy daughter anymore. I was the whistleblower. My phone stopped ringing with accusations and started ringing with apologies. People who had ignored me for 20 years were suddenly desperate to tell me they always knew there was something off about Grant. I didn't answer them. I let the calls go to voicemail. I didn't want their belated validation. When the ship finally docked, the reality of the situation was waiting for them on the pier. I wasn't there, of course. I was sitting in Elliot Vance's office, drinking lukewarm tea. But I heard about it. Lydia was the first off the gangway. She didn't wait for Grant. She didn't wait for our parents. She walked off the ship wearing dark sunglasses and a hoodie, carrying her own bags. She filed for a legal separation 2 hours later. I didn't hear this from the news. I heard it from the clerk at the county courthouse, who happened to be the sister of a girl I went to high school with. In a small town, information is currency, and suddenly, everyone wanted to pay me. Grant didn't get arrested. Not yet. White-collar crime takes time to prosecute. But he was served with 3 separate lawsuits before he even got to his car. His investors, the sharks he had been afraid of, were not happy. The text messages I received from Lydia later confirmed that his accounts had been frozen, not by the government, but by the private equity firm that backed his shell company. He was radioactive. That afternoon, Elliot Vance made the call we had been preparing for. He called the legal department of the bank that held the lien on Evelyn's house, the bank Grant had used to underwrite his predatory loan. The conversation was short. Elliot didn't threaten. He simply forwarded the medical records proving Evelyn was under the influence of opioids on September 14th. He forwarded the affidavit from Aunt Celeste, and he forwarded a link to the article by Marcus Thorne. Then he made an offer. Ms. Alexander is willing to satisfy the principal of the loan to clear the title. Elliot said, his voice calm and reasonable. She will pay the $210,000. However, she will not pay a cent of interest. And in exchange for this payment, the bank will sign a document acknowledging the invalidity of the power of attorney and agreeing to hold harmless Evelyn Price from any future claims. Or we can go to court, where I will play the audio recording of her daughter conspiring to defraud her. The bank folded in 20 minutes. They didn't want the publicity. They wanted the bad debt off their books. It was done. The house was safe. The fallout for my parents was less legal and more social, which, for them, was infinitely worse. They returned to Raleigh expecting to brazen it out. They went to their country club for Sunday brunch. As they had done for 30 years, they were seated at a table near the kitchen. The waiter, a man who had served them for a decade, was polite but distant. Friends they had played bridge with for 20 years suddenly found the patterns on the tablecloth fascinating when my mother walked by. No one was rude. No one shouted. They just turned away. It is a specific kind of violence, that turning away, it denies your existence. It says, you are no longer one of us. My mother called me that night. Avery, she said. Her voice was trembling, but it wasn't with sorrow. It was with indignation. Do you know what Mrs. Gable did today? She looked right through me. Me! I chaired the charity auction with her last year. I remained silent, holding the phone to my ear. looking out the window of my new apartment. You have to fix this. Avery, she continued, her voice rising. You have to put out a statement. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we are a united family. If you have that much money, you can make a donation. Name a wing of the hospital after us. That will shut them up. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask about Evelyn. She asked for a shield. She wanted my money to buy back the reputation she had sold. I can't do that. Mom, I said quietly. What do you mean you can't? You have millions. I have the money, I said. But I can't buy you a new character. Avery! How dare you? I hung up. I blocked the number. It was the first time in my life I had blocked my mother. It felt like cutting off a limb that had been gangrenous for years. It hurt. But it was the pain of healing. I didn't move into a mansion. I didn't buy a sports car. I rented a small, quiet cottage on the edge of town, surrounded by old oak trees. It had a garden that had been neglected for years. I spent my days there, working the soil. I pulled weeds. I planted hydrangeas. I fixed the trellis. I worked with my hands, feeling the dirt under my fingernails, grounding myself. The $100 million sat in the trust account, accruing interest, a silent giant that I ignored. I didn't need it to live. I needed it to win the war. And the war was winding down, or so I thought. My main project wasn't my garden. It was Evelyn's house. I hired a contractor, a man I knew from my work, honest and efficient. We worked quietly. We didn't touch the historic facade. We worked on the inside. We widened the doorways for her wheelchair. We installed a lift on the back staircase, hidden so it wouldn't ruin the Victorian aesthetic she loved. We renovated the bathroom with a roll-in shower and grab bars that looked like polished brass fixtures rather than hospital equipment. I used my own money, my salary savings, not the lottery winnings, to pay for the initial materials. I wanted to build this with my own labor. When I brought Evelyn home, it was a Tuesday afternoon. The sky was a brilliant, crisp blue. She sat in her wheelchair on the sidewalk, looking up at the house. The paint was peeling slightly on the eaves. The porch sagged a little on the left, but it was hers. Is it true? She asked, her voice thin. Is it really clear? I showed her the paper, the release of Lienne, the deed, now free of any encumbrance. It is yours. Grandma, I said, nobody can touch it, and nobody can touch you. She didn't cry. Evelyn Price was not a woman who cried easily. She just reached out and touched the iron railing of the fence. She traced the cold metal with her hand. Reclaiming it, take me inside, she said. We sat in her living room that afternoon. I made tea. It was quiet. The ghosts of the last few months seemed to recede, pushed back by the smell of steeping Earl Grey and the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. Avery, she said, putting her cup down, you know they aren't done. I know. I said, Grant is ruined. Mom and Dad are pariahs. That makes them dangerous. She said, a cornered rat will bite even when its neck is broken. I nodded. I knew she was right, but I felt safe here. Then, the letter came. It wasn't from my parents. It was from Lydia. It arrived via courier. A thick cream envelope, no return address. I opened it sitting on my porch steps. It wasn't a typed legal threat. It was handwritten. The ink was smudged in places, as if the writer had been left-handed or crying, or both. Avery, I'm staying at a friend's apartment in Charlotte. I haven't spoken to Grant in 4 days. I don't know where he is, and I don't care. I wanted to write to you because I couldn't say this on the phone. I was afraid you would hang up, and you would have been right to. I looked at you for 30 years, and I never really saw you. I saw the sister who wasn't as pretty, or as successful, or as lucky. I believed the story Mom told us, that you were difficult, that you liked being alone. I see now that you weren't difficult. You were just the only one who wasn't pretending. I am not asking for money. Please believe that. I have some savings that Grant didn't touch, and I'm going to get a job, a real job. I think I might be good at something if I actually try. I just wanted to say that when I looked at Grant on that ship, when I saw the way he looked at you, I was terrified. Not for the money. I was terrified because I realized he looked at me the same way. Like an asset. Like something to be used. You saved Grandma, but I think you saved me too. Because if you hadn't blown it all up, I would have stayed on that ship forever. If you ever want to get coffee, cheap coffee, my treat, let me know. If not, I understand. Your sister, Lydia. I folded the letter. I felt a stinging in my eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Forgiveness is a landscape you have to travel across. You don't just teleport there, but it was a start. It was a crack in the ice. I put the letter in my pocket. I looked out at the garden I was restoring. Things were quieting down. The lawsuits were grinding through the system. The scandal was fading from the front page, replaced by newer, louder news. But peace is often just the interval between two wars. 2 days later, Elliot Vance called me. Avery, he said. His voice wasn't relaxed. It had the sharp, professional edge I had heard the first day I met him. What is it? I asked. Did Grant file another motion? No, Elliot said. It is your mother. I sighed. What is she doing now? Trying to bill me for the cruise? She has retained counsel, Elliot said. A high-end firm in Atlanta. They just sent over a packet of discovery documents for a civil suit they are preparing to file. Let them sue. I said, the trust is airtight. The ticket is gone. It is not about the trust. Avery, it is about the intent. Elliot paused. They have a document. Avery, a gift confirmation affidavit. I frowned. I didn't sign anything. I said, she tried to make me sign that liability waiver before they left, but I refused. I took it home. I know, Elliot said. But this document isn't the liability waiver. It is dated the day of Thanksgiving. It states that the lottery ticket was purchased by Martha Alexander and transferred to Avery Alexander solely for the purpose of custodial holding due to the mother's lack of pockets at the time of purchase. That is a lie, I said, my voice rising. That is an absolute lie. She handed it to me in an envelope. It was a gift. Everyone saw it. And here is the kicker, Elliot said, his voice dropping. It has your signature on it. I froze. The wind rustled the leaves of the oak tree above me, but I couldn't hear it. I didn't sign it. I whispered, I am looking at a digital copy. Avery, it looks like your signature. It looks exactly like your signature. Grant, I said. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He has my signature on file. From the insurance forms I signed years ago. From the birthday cards. He traced it. Or he photoshopped it. We can prove it is a forgery. Elliot said, we can hire forensic handwriting analysts. We can fight this. But? I asked. I could hear the but in his voice. But if they file this, they freeze the assets of the trust until the validity of the document is determined. It could take years. And during that time, your mother's lawyers will request a stipend from the frozen funds for her pain and suffering and legal fees. They are trying to bleed you out. Avery, they know they can't win on the merits, so they are going to win on endurance. I sat down on the porch steps. They forged my signature. I said, just like they forged Grandma's. It is their playbook, Elliot said. They are doubling down. I closed my eyes. I thought about the peace I had found in the garden. I thought about Evelyn sleeping safely in her room. I thought about Lydia's letter. I wasn't afraid. I was just tired. But then I remembered the bag. I remembered the false bottom. I remembered something else that was in that bag. Something I hadn't shown Elliot yet because I didn't think it was relevant. A small, seemingly insignificant stack of receipts that Evelyn had hoarded from that Thanksgiving week. Elliot, I said, yes, don't file the response yet. Why? Because if they are claiming Mom bought the ticket and gave it to me to hold because she didn't have pockets, then they are claiming she was the one at the gas station. Yes, that is their narrative. I opened my eyes. I looked at the leather bag sitting by the door. Evelyn didn't just keep her own secrets. I said, she watched everyone. I stood up. Let them file. Elliot, let them swear under oath that Mom bought that ticket, because I think I have the one thing that proves she was nowhere near that gas station. What do you have? I have the timestamp, I said, And I have the alibi. The war wasn't over. They had launched their final missile. But they didn't realize that by forging that document, they had just given me the coordinates to their exact location. I will see you in court. Elliot. I hung up the phone. The silence was gone. The garden was quiet. But inside the house, in the old leather bag, the truth was waiting to scream. The legal summons arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic about ruining my day. I did not need to open the thick manila envelope to know what it contained. It was the last desperate gasp of a drowning animal. My mother, Martha Alexander, had filed a civil suit claiming that the winning lottery ticket was a custodial asset belonging to the Alexander family estate, arguing that she had purchased the ticket and merely entrusted it to me for safekeeping because she lacked a purse at the moment of purchase. It was a lie so bold, it was almost impressive. The document she had attached as evidence was a digital copy of a gift confirmation affidavit, dated Thanksgiving Day. It bore a signature that looked remarkably like mine. It was a clumsy forgery, likely traced from an old birthday card or tax form Grant had on file. But it was enough to grant them a temporary hearing. They were trying to force a settlement. They were betting that I would pay them $10 or $20 million just to make them go away. They did not know I wasn't betting with money anymore. I was betting with their reputation. The mediation took place in a sterile conference room in downtown Raleigh, neutral ground chosen by the court. The room smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. On one side of the long mahogany table sat my parents and a team of expensive lawyers from Atlanta, hired, I assumed, on a contingency fee, because my parents certainly didn't have the cash to pay their retainers. Grant was not there. He was currently dealing with a deposition for his own fraud investigation and had been advised by his criminal defense attorney to stay as far away from the Alexander family civil suits as possible. On the other side sat Elliot Vance and me. My mother looked terrible. She was wearing a black dress that was too formal for a Tuesday morning, perhaps trying to evoke the image of a grieving matriarch. My father refused to make eye contact with me, staring resolutely at a water pitcher in the center of the table. The opposing counsel, a man with a smile that showed too many teeth, opened the proceedings. "We are here to rectify a misunderstanding," he said smoothly. Mrs. Alexander purchased a ticket. She handed it to her daughter. There was no donative intent to transfer the underlying value of the jackpot. The affidavit we have submitted proves that Avery Alexander acknowledged her role as a custodian of this asset. We are simply asking for the return of the property. Elliot Vance didn't even blink. He adjusted his glasses and pushed a single piece of paper across the table. "This affidavit," Elliot said, his voice dry and precise, "is dated November 24th. However, the metadata on the digital file, which your client, Mr. Huxley, foolishly forgot to scrub, shows it was created on December 3rd. That is 4 days after the jackpot was announced." The opposing lawyer stiffened. He picked up the paper, his smile faltering. "Furthermore," Elliot continued, "we have forensic handwriting analysis ready to testify that the signature on this document is a digital composite. It is a forgery, and in the state of North Carolina, presenting forged evidence in a civil mediation is a felony." My mother made a small, choking sound. "That is ridiculous," she hissed. "I bought that ticket. I gave it to her. It is my money." I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, I didn't see the woman who controlled my childhood. I saw a terrified, greedy stranger. "It is not about the money, Mom," I said quietly. "It never was." I reached into my bag, the old leather bag that had sat at my feet during every meeting, every crisis, every turning point of this war. I pulled out a sealed envelope. The opposing lawyer frowned. "What is this?" "This," I said, "is the reason we are not settling." I tore the seal. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I pulled out a piece of yellowed-lined paper. The handwriting was shaky. The script of a woman fighting through the fog of heavy medication. Elliot explained for the record. "This is a notarized statement from Evelyn Price, dated September 15th, the day after you forced her to sign the power of attorney in the hospital. She wrote this in the presence of a witness. one of the nurses who suspected what you were doing and helped her hide it in this bag." I began to read. I didn't shout. I read it with the same calm detachment I had used to survive 30 years in their house. "I am writing this because my son Robert and his wife Martha brought papers to my hospital bed today. They told me it was for insurance, but I saw the word power. I was too weak to stop them. My hand would not listen to my brain. They guided the pen. They think they have taken my voice. They think that because I am old, I am stupid." I paused. My father had turned a sickly shade of gray. My mother was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. I continued reading the final paragraph. "If my granddaughter Avery ever stands up to them, if she ever opens this bag and finds this note, it means she has finally realized that she is worth more than they told her. If Avery stands up, it means she still has kindness left in her heart. To whoever is reading this, do not let them turn that kindness into a loophole. They will try to use her love to rob her. Do not let them—" I placed the paper on the table. "Do not turn kindness into a loophole." I repeated. I looked at the opposing lawyer. "You have a forged affidavit claiming I agreed to be a custodian." I said, "I have a notarized statement from the family matriarch proving a pattern of coercion. Forgery. An elder abuse that predates the lottery win by months. If we go to trial, I will not just win the money, I will put my parents in prison for fraud." The lawyer looked at the note. He looked at the metadata report Elliot had provided. He looked at his clients. He closed his folder. He leaned over and whispered something to my mother. She shook her head violently. He whispered again, more urgently. She slumped in her chair, covering her face with her hands. The lawyer looked up at us. "What are your terms?" he asked. I didn't let Elliot answer. I answered myself. "The mortgage on 404 Elm Street is fully satisfied." I said, "I have already paid the bank $210,000 to clear the lien. The house is free." My father looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Does that mean," he started? "It means the house belongs to Evelyn Price," I said, cutting him off. "And here's the deal. I will drop the criminal complaint regarding the forged power of attorney. I will not press charges for the attempted theft of the lottery winnings." I slid a document across the table. "In exchange, you will sign this. It is a permanent restraining order and a forfeiture of all future claims against the Evelyn Price estate and against me. You will never set foot on the property at 404 Elm Street again. You will never contact Evelyn. You will never contact me." But my mother sobbed. "We are your parents." "No," I said, "you are the people who sold me for a cruise ticket. Sign it, or we go to trial." They signed. They signed it with shaking hands. Under the fluorescent lights of a windowless room, there was no hug, no goodbye. When the ink was dry, I stood up, picked up the leather bag, and walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what I was leaving behind. A lifetime of waiting for permission to exist. The aftermath was a slow, quiet settling of dust. Grant was indicted 3 weeks later. The investigation into Huxley Capital Services uncovered a Ponzi-like scheme involving 6 other families. He was facing 10 to 15 years. He would likely spend the prime of his life in a federal facility that did not offer golf. My parents were not charged, thanks to my mercy, but their social execution was complete. They had to sell the big colonial house to pay their own debts and the legal fees from the Atlanta firm. They moved into a 2-bedroom condo in a neighboring town. Far away from the country club whispered about them. I didn't visit them. I didn't call. I had bought my freedom, and the receipt was filed with the county clerk. The real ending of the story didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in December. I brought Evelyn home. The house on Elm Street was ready. The ramp was hidden behind new landscaping. The floors were polished. The smell of old medicine and neglect was gone, replaced by the scent of fresh lavender and baking bread. I wheeled her up the path. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the porch. Evelyn looked at the door. She looked at the polished brass knocker. She didn't speak until we were inside, in the living room where she had spent 50 years of her life. I had placed her favorite chair exactly where it used to be, before Grant had tried to sell it. She sat there, looking at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of light from the window. "Avery," she said softly. "Yes." "Grandma?" She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was stronger now. The fear was gone from her eyes. "You finally came to the right place," she said. She wasn't talking about the house. She was talking about me. She was talking about the place in my own head where I stopped being the victim and started being the architect of my own life. I squeezed her hand. "I am home, Grandma." A week later, I received a text from Lydia. "I am at the coffee shop on 4th, the one with the bad muffins. Are you around?" I went. Lydia was sitting at a corner table. She looked different. She was wearing jeans and a sweater that looked like she had bought it at a thrift store. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired, but she looked real. I sat down. I didn't offer to buy her anything. I waited. She looked at her coffee cup. "I got a job," she said. "Receptionist at a dental office. It pays $16 an hour. That is a start." I said. She nodded. "I am learning how to budget," she said with a dry laugh. "It turns out I am terrible at math, but I am learning." She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet. "I miss them sometimes." She whispered, "Mom and Dad, is that sick? After everything they did?" "No," I said. "It is not sick. It is just grief. You are grieving the parents you wanted, not the ones you had." Lydia reached across the table. She didn't try to hold my hand. She just rested her fingers near mine on the table. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Avery," she said. "I was awful. I was a part of it. I just want to know if I can earn it. Eventually. I don't need you to be my sister right now. I just need you to let me try to learn how to be yours." I looked at her. I saw the girl who used to share a room with me before our parents separated us into winner and loser. "You can try," I said. "But coffee is on you today." Lydia smiled. A real, genuine smile. Deal. In the months that followed, I did not buy a yacht. I did not buy an island. I established the Evelyn Price Foundation. It was a small, focused fund designed to provide grants and legal support to women in creative and technical fields. Women like me, who had been told their dreams were hobbies. Women who were trapped in financial abuse. Women who needed a safety net to escape. I kept my job at the design firm. I liked my job. I liked making spaces accessible. The only difference was that now, when I walked into a meeting, I didn't worry about being heard. I spoke, and if they didn't listen, I had the power to build the building myself. The money changed everything, and it changed nothing. $100 million did not make me a better person. It did not fix my trauma. It did not erase the memory of that Thanksgiving dinner. But as I stand on the porch of Evelyn's house, watching the sun dip below the horizon, feeling the weight of the old leather bag on my shoulder, lighter now, empty of secrets, I realize what the money actually did. It cut the strings. For 33 years, I was a puppet dancing to a tune I hated, terrified that if I stopped, I would fall. The money didn't give me wings. It just gave me a pair of scissors. I cut the strings, I dropped to the floor, and I found that I could stand on my own 2 feet. This wasn't a story about winning the lottery. It was a story about winning myself back. And for the first time in the history of the Alexander family, the winner wasn't the one who took the most. It was the one who refused to be taken. And that, finally, is a prize worth keeping. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from right now. Drop a comment below with your city and what time it is there. Let's see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed Avery's journey, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by more people. See you in the next one.